Since starting in 1997, One Piece has become the highest-selling manga series in history. It's a testament to the quality of the franchise that even 26 years later, the series is still reaching new milestones. In 2023 alone, the live-action adaptation on Netflix broke multiple streaming records, becoming the most watched show in over 80 countries. And Luffy even got his own balloon during the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Shout out to Bucket Hat Luffy. One Piece is somehow still growing more and more popular while simultaneously producing high-quality content across their products. But what about their games? It's quite common for popular franchises to venture into the gaming realm, at least at some point, and for as long as One Piece has been around, they've produced quite a few titles over the years. And so, I wanted to explore the history of One Piece games. Were they always hitting it out of the park with the same level of quality as their other products? What did they try, what succeeded, and what failed? So allow me to take you through a complete history of One Piece games. One Piece's gaming journey began in the year 2000 on a little lesser-known handheld called the Wonder Swan. The system was a Japanese exclusive developed by Gunpei Yokoi, a legend in the gaming space who was responsible for creating the Game & Watch series and most prominently designed the original Game Boy. After the failure of the Virtual Boy in 1995, he left Nintendo to start his own company, where he worked on developing a new system that could compete with his own creation. Bandai was similarly going through their own struggles of truly breaking into the gaming market. While they were predominantly known for manufacturing toys from popular titles and their LCD line of games, after their incredible success with the Tamagotchi in 1996, Bandai decided that they wanted to be more heavily involved in the gaming industry. They had tried their hand at creating plenty of consoles prior, but none of them really took off as they would have liked. There was one point where there were even potential plans to merge with Sega, but that obviously fell through. That's when Bandai brought Gunpei on board, where he would develop the Wonder Swan. Unfortunately, Gunpei tragically died in 1997 in a car accident before he ever got to see the release of his console. The Wonder Swan released 2 years later in 1999. The handheld is unique in the sense that it's designed to be able to be played both horizontally and vertically. Not every game demanded and/or utilized this feature, but it was one of the unique design choices implemented to make it stand out amongst its competitors. Due to Bandai's large catalog of anime licenses, there were many first-party titles developed exclusively for the Wonder Swan. And as I'm sure you've guessed by now, one of those was One Piece.
パネルを操りグランドラインを目指せ公開アドベンチャーテレビアニメワンピース目指せ海賊王 Wonder Swan.
The series' first foray into gaming was with a title called Become Pirate King. It's a turn-based strategy game that loosely adapts the events from the East Blue Saga. The gameplay revolves around strategically building paths to designated locations on the map. You're given a choice between 4 path structures: straights, elbows, T's, and crosses. The paths can be rotated in whichever direction you want and placed on the map. Depending on the color of the path determines its permanence on the board. The light paths can be replaced by a new one at any point, but the dark paths are permanent. A tile must be placed every turn, and depending on how many points are on the tile, determines how many spaces you're allowed to move. You make your way to each location to advance the story. It's pretty basic stuff once you understand how it works, and that can be especially difficult because this game is only in Japanese. A lot of these early titles are Japan exclusive, so you'll have to forgive me if I just lightly breeze through some of the details on some of these. The game isn't all just path making, however. On the way, you can be interrupted and forced into battle by either Sea Kings or, more typically, other pirates. When in combat, you turn the Wonder Swan into vertical mode. The combat in this game is similar to the exploration. You're given a 3x3 grid with each crew on opposite ends. It's your job to create a working path to allow your characters to attack. You're allowed 3 characters, and each one will take their respective right, middle, or left route. And that's the game. Build paths to locations to advance the story and fend off pirates when encountered. To be honest, this game is rough. It does not hold up well after all of these years, and I'm not sure it even held up back then. It was released in July of 2000, and by the end of the year, it just barely managed to sell under 20,000 units. Not a massive success by any means. Maybe try loading it up once since it was the first and see just to experience it. While the Wonder Swan would continue releasing One Piece titles for a little while longer, it would obviously have been a silly decision for the franchise to limit themselves to only that console, which is why in 2001 they would venture onto the PlayStation with One Piece Grand Battle.
One Piece Grand Battle!
Now this was a statement for the franchise entering the gaming market. Forget about the story, trying to retell the events from the manga. This was all about action. It was a 2.5D fighting game akin to the likes of Super Smash Bros., where the characters and environments are all rendered in 3D, but the combat remains on a two-dimensional plane. Gameplay is pretty straightforward. You can attack, grab, block, crouch, double jump, and run. Of course, each character's movesets are all unique to who you play. Use all of those to bring your opponent's life bar to 0 and you win. While the health bars are standardized amongst all players, what is not are their stats. Each character is rated on a scale from A to E based on their offense, defense, and agility. Certain players like Zoro will obviously have a higher offensive stat, while characters like Usopp excel in agility. You can also use a special attack during the fight as well. These are fully animated moves that can be used at any time, but there are 3 levels to this, and the lower your health, the greater the damage done by the move. This allows for the potential losing player the opportunity to make a potential comeback. These are honestly pretty neat. My personal favorite, however, has to be Sanji, who, beyond all perception of his character, which even at this time was Whiskey Peak, pulls out a gun. I think the only time he has ever done that in the series is when he pulled one on Robin, which I assume this is a reference to. But it's still wild to see just how unsure of his character the developers were at the time. It reminds me of his initial concept art, where he was strapped with some pistols as well. But seeing this was just worthy of note. Like Super Smash Bros., there are also items, though they're not nearly as gimmicky or as many in this game. Items can appear on the map providing a variety of uses or hindrances. Things like swords, crowns, and coins raise attack power, defense, or agility respectively, while things like spoiled food, bombs, and lanterns all hurt you if touched. You can pick up and throw these items at your opponent, or if you're like me, just run into them like an idiot. There's a total of 6 maps and 16 playable characters, however you only start out with the 5 initial Straw Hats. The series was only around Whiskey Peak at the time, which is why Vivi is referred to in this game as Miss Wednesday. So many of the unlockable characters consist of the East Blue cast. They even put Panda Man in as a playable character who would continue to make Easter egg appearances in many of the games. To unlock everyone, you must complete the Event Battle game mode, which puts you up against 6 randomly selected CPU opponents. There are small little interactions between the characters before they battle, which for the most part counts as this game's story. Once you beat the event, you get an ending cinematic. For some reason, the Straw Hats' ending, which is their launch ceremony onto the Grand Line, is extremely blurred with rain. Like, more so than the original for some reason. You'd think that I did this editing to avoid copyright, but no, this is just how it is. Grand Battle was way more successful than Become Pirate King, selling over 400,000 copies and launching a whole series of sequels and spin-offs the following years. It was such a success that 1 year later they released Grand Battle 2. I'm not going to be that chronological with every game that was released. Grouping up some of these games is going to provide some simplicity throughout the video. The series was finally past Whiskey Peak and through Alabasta, meaning they had a whole new set of characters for use. Vivi dropped her moniker of Miss Wednesday and could now actually be referred to by her real name. Chopper joined the crew, meaning Wapple was a playable villain as well, but Baroque Works serves as much of the new roster in addition to the originals who all make their return. Nico Robin, Mr. 2, 2, 3, and Crocodile are now all playable, along with Karu and Ace. You know, seeing these older games really makes you realize which characters they thought were worthy of being playable at the time, which in the years following they have since been abandoned. You don't often see Karu in the playable roster list, but god damn it, he made it here. In total, there are 8 new characters and 6 new stages. The main difference in this game is they got rid of the health bar system to activate specials. Instead, they replaced it with a food charge mechanic, represented by the circular gauge next to your health. This system would persist through the rest of the franchise. When you destroy boxes, food drops from them, and collecting them fills up your charge. Depending on how many charges you have determines what level of special you do. This system also activates a different mechanic known as heat. When all 3 charges are filled and you're knocked unconscious, you'll enter this state where you have increased strength, range, and speed for a small period of time, allowing for a second wind to perhaps turn the tides of battle. I was unfortunately on the receiving end of this by the CPU, and it definitely hurts when you lose to it. The heat system would also remain a mainstay in the franchise. This game is pretty much DLC before DLC was a thing. A few new characters, a few new maps, back then that constituted a new game. Sanji still uses a gun, so I guess even after Alabasta they weren't certain he would remain so kick exclusive. The game sold over 200,000 copies in its first week and over 500,000 lifetime, proving that the model was still a success. For now though, I'll hold off on going over the sequel titles as the games developed past the PlayStation and onto future generation consoles.
今度のグラバトは激突バロックワークス楽しさボリューム全てがヒートアップワンピースグランドバトル2 3月20日発売マジでこの野郎チョッパー初登場
While the WonderSwan and PlayStation were doing their own things with One Piece, in 2001 an RPG for the Game Boy Color was released called Birth of Luffy's Dream Pirate Crew. The game, as would unfortunately become commonplace for many of these titles, recounts the events from the series. This game is a retelling of the East Blue Saga from Higuma to Arlong, with very minor changes and altered scenarios to fit the format of a game. The whole thing is open world, meaning you can walk around finding items, entering buildings, and talking to the characters around town. Surprisingly, you are not restricted to follow the sequence of events as they happened in the series. As a result of this open nature, the game can be approached in whichever order you want. You can recruit the Straw Hats out of sequence, or even, for the sake of this game, recruit the enemies. Kuro, Don Krieg, Alvida, and so on are all able to join your crew. It's due to this alteration that the story loosely follows the East Blue Saga, as dialogue changes depending on who you have. While a neat idea in concept allowing you to take your own path, the gameplay is where it suffers the most. While the overworld is pretty much reminiscent of Pokemon, the combat is played on a grid. You have to move around the board and close the distance until you can attack. Each character is unique in how far they're able to attack from and how many spaces they're allowed to move. Everyone also has unique skills, which also vary in terms of attack ranges. It's just not very fun. Moving feels like a completely unnecessary step. You have to close the distance no matter what, so you just feel like the whole thing would have been better if it was completely removed. And the whole top-down grid look just isn't as charming as the rest of the game when you're walking around. You know, of everything, the overworld is cute for a Game Boy game, but everything else doesn't really hold up.
あいつもこいつも君の仲間にもしもの冒険が今始まるテレビアニメワンピース夢のルフィ海賊団誕生嘘じゃねえよ
4 months later, in August of 2001, Set Sail Pirate Crew was released for the PlayStation. This game takes quite the unique approach when compared to every other One Piece game, and it's the fact that it's the only game where you never play as any of the Straw Hats. It's the first time the games decided to introduce completely original characters and branch off in creating their own original story. Now, being a Japanese-only release, getting a grasp on what the story is usually can be fairly difficult, but a fair amount of these games actually have translations or guides online that can help you navigate through the dialogue or menus. Or sometimes, like in the case of Grand Battle, translations aren't even needed. But Set Sail Pirate Crew has a severe lack of translations or information on it, so details concerning the story may be a bit lacking on my part. From what I understand, you take control of the newly introduced Gejitsu Pirates. They're a group of 3 commanded by a boy named Yuta, with his 2 friends Ryuji and Reika serving as his crew. From what the cutscenes make out, he was so inspired by Luffy and the Straw Hats' exploits that he decided to assemble a crew of his own with his friends to find a particular treasure. When they set sail, they run into Usopp, who reveals that they have already apparently collected the pieces they seek. So the trio agree to join the Usopp pirates and seek out the other Straw Hats. Gameplay largely consists of sailing the Going Merry to various locations. You can pick up items and shoot cannonballs to destroy obstacles in your way. When it comes to combat, things take an interesting turn. It's set up like a traditional turn-based battle system would, but this game implements a roulette system to things, where picking the right cards will determine the damage done, may allow you to take more turns, or even call on a support character to do a special attack. The inputs are all instant, so gameplay is determined on your ability to time things. It was honestly kind of fun keeping you actively engaged in the combat. But that's not the only type of combat. During certain story events, you will engage other ships in naval combat. These take place in first person and task you with shooting specified points on the enemy ship to take them down. Outside of that, it's your traditional RPG elements in terms of weapons and upgrades and items. The game was actually a lot of fun in this regard, especially when compared to some of these early titles. Unfortunately, as I stated earlier, due to the translation, I wasn't able to make it that far into the game to tell you whether or not it holds up or if the story is any good. But it was a bold decision to center a story around these new characters. However, it wouldn't be the only time.
今度は完全オリジナルストーリーの海賊アドベンチャー RPG だ from TV アニメーション One Piece 飛び出せ海賊団君にお似合いだ
While the Wonder Swan released less than a year after the Game Boy Color and was meant to serve as its competitor, much like the original Game Boy, the Wonder Swan upon its debut had one major flaw. It was still in black and white. Nintendo was already setting the pace for what handheld gaming was capable of, so to come out with a product that was on par with what they were doing 10 years ago just wasn't cutting it. So 21 months after the Wonder Swan's original release, the Wonder Swan Color came out, allowing newer titles to really thrive. In 2001, One Piece Legend of the Rainbow Island was released. The story is yet again centered around some new characters. It revolves around a young boy from Logtown named Dias. He has dreams of traveling to a fairy tale land known as Rainbow Island so he could someday be rich. On one unsuspecting afternoon, he winds up running into a girl named Atoli who's getting harassed by some pirates. Dias intervenes with his signature boomerang, rescuing her and bringing her back to his house for safety. Turns out the reason she was being pursued is because she possesses one of 3 pendants needed to reach Rainbow Island. And Dias just so happens to also be in possession of one of the other thirds. You can probably see where this is going. Their interests align and the plot continues from there. Where the Straw Hats come in is in the story of One Piece. While you take on the perspective of Dias and Atoli, who are set in an original story, everyone else is doing what they originally did. It's a hybrid of both the canon material and original plot. Dias runs into the Straw Hats upon their arrival at Logtown, and sharing his dream with Luffy, he fits right in with the crew. After angering the pirates, Dias lures them into the execution square where Luffy almost got his head chopped off. After saving them, the two join the Straw Hats. Dias and Atoli's story concerning Rainbow Island is interspersed between adapting the series. So you're going through the canon events, just now with 2 new kids and a side plot of Rainbow Island. A unique approach, to say the least. I can say for certain that the gameplay is unlike anything I've experienced before. You can choose up to 3 characters to fight in combat. When a battle first starts, it's easy to think that it's set up like your traditional turn-based RPG. But in actuality, the combat is played like a game of spinning tops. When you or an opponent is attacked, they are shoved in that direction. If they clash against a wall, they will bounce off of it. You don't have any control over which direction you attack from. You'll always attack in a straight line, but that straight line might be on an angle. Where the complexity of the gameplay comes in is if either party is bounced off the wall and back into their opponent, they will continuously be attacked. So, if you can corner an enemy with two of your party members, you can repeatedly bounce them back and forth over and over until they're dead. But again, that's kind of up to chance as you don't have control over your character's movements. It's fun, it's unique, it's spinning tops, it's Beyblade. It's been around for a while, but it's fun for a reason. It's not necessarily all skill-based and there's a bit of chance at play, but for a WonderSwan color game, it doesn't seem that bad. Unfortunately, a translation still doesn't exist, but there are videos online that you can find that translate all of the story's dialogue. So if you're interested in watching what Rainbow Island is all about while ignoring the gameplay, feel free to seek it out.
行こうぜ吹っ飛ばしガンガンバトルで目指すは虹の島ワンピース虹の島伝説ワンダースワンで待ってるぞ
お宝あら
今回ばかりはみんな敵初めてお宝争奪バトルワンピーストレジャーウォーズ
Wonder Swan.
While we've yet to reach the highest of highs One Piece games have to offer, we've already reached the lowest of lows with One Piece Treasure Wars 1 and 2. They really managed to do something impressive with this, and that was release both games within the same calendar year. Treasure Wars 1 came out in January of 2002, while the game's sequel, Welcome to Buggyland, came out in December of the same year. 2002 was a big year for One Piece games. 7 separate titles, including these, were released, and bookending both sides of the years was Treasure Wars. As such, the games don't have that much of a difference between them, but that hardly matters much because they are bad, and you do not want to play them anyway. The first game somehow features an original story. After their eternal pose is stolen by a crow, the Straw Hats stop by on a mysterious island to replenish their supplies, but it turns out the island is owned by a man named King Cello. He is searching for a treasure known as the Life Gems, but they are hidden on 5 islands. Whoever collects the gems and returns them to him will be rewarded with money and an eternal pose to an island of their choice. And that's where the crew gets involved. Instead of working together as they realistically would, they chose to fight against one another. There's also a new girl named Helsing. I don't know why she's here. I think she's just a pirate that is meant to be an original antagonist. Don't let the gameplay confuse you. This is not a party game, as video games tend to adopt the playstyle of. This is a board game. You roll the dice to move around the board and, as the story implies, try to find the life gems hidden around the map. But it's not all just dice rolling and moving around, you can also initiate battles against the others. When you initiate a battle, it is a simple game of rock, paper, scissors, but everything is tied to a health bar, which is essential to every action taken. Of course, losing a battle will lose you health, and if it drops below 0, you suffer a respawn penalty. But it's also a currency for movement abilities and other special actions, and bits of it will be used when you perform them. Some areas around the board and items can replenish it, but it's the only stat you really need to keep track of. And that's all there is to the game. Treasure Wars 2 is the same game, except they omitted the original story, and instead the Straw Hats just challenge the Buggy Pirates to find a treasure. And Nico Robin is now playable, since the story advanced through Alabasta at the time. But it's not like that matters, the character skins all function the exact same anyway. These 2 titles would make you glad you don't have easy access to a WonderSwan. As such, you should just forget they exist and move on. A departure away from the lack of quality to One Piece Grand Line Dream Adventure Log for the Game Boy Color. The game was developed by Alpha Unit and was released on June 28, 2002. I struggle to find much to say about this game because it's overall a fairly straightforward and solid One Piece game. It's a traditional turn-based RPG that, surprise, recounts the events from the series, from Logtown to Warship Island. It unexpectedly goes into detail a lot more than many other One Piece games do when recapping the story. I don't remember the last time I saw Laboon or Crocus show up in many of the more modern titles. As such, the game covers the arcs much better than most, honestly, even the ones that are made today. It must have been a benefit of the time because there was so much less content to adapt that you could simply go into more detail of a few arcs, as opposed to now, where the games almost feel like they're trying to adapt over 1,000 chapters leading to the major points of the story being adapted, but skimming over pretty much all of the smaller details. But here, everyone's here from the arcs because it's all they had at the time. If I'm gonna be picky, I'm not the biggest fan of the way the sprites look in the overworld and are presented in the game, but when it comes to the portraits and some of the larger scenes, I'm actually quite impressed with the detail, as there are a lot of characters that get adapted. The gameplay is as fun as any other turn-based RPG. You're only allowed to field 3 characters during battle, which is unfortunate, but the combat doesn't do anything crazy. It's all the standard options you get from any other game. Because the story and gameplay don't try to break the mold or do anything weird, you wind up with a fairly safe and solid entry raised higher thanks to the amount of detail, especially when you compared them to some of the other games, like the last 2.
Game or color. 出会った仲間がいる。戦った友がいる。君は誰と冒険に出る。ワンピース幻のグランドライン冒険記。
Returning back to the Grand Battle line of games, after the success of the original and its sequel, it was clear that Bandai wanted to capitalize on its popularity and proven formula as much as possible. It wasn't just about making continuations, but also expanding the games to other platforms, which is why 4 months after Grand Battle 2's release, in July of 2002, Grand Battle Swan Colosseum was released for the Wonder Swan color. It was a spin-off of Grand Battle 2, yet again set in Alabasta, but it was a version made specifically for the Wonder Swan color. Unfortunately, the hardware wasn't as powerful as the PlayStation, meaning it couldn't just port the game over with lower quality graphics as would typically be done today. No, instead they basically had to rebuild this game from the ground up and redesign everything visually. It's the only entry in the Grand Battle series to feature entirely 2D character sprites and environments. Arguably, the graphics of this game hold up better than any in the series, considering 2D sprites are pretty much timeless. You can look back at the PS1 entries and recognize, yep, those are PlayStation 1 graphics, but these still look fresh, and that's in part thanks to the animation and effort put into each character's attacks. They were so well done, many of the assets of this game would even be used for a different One Piece title later down the line. But let's not get ahead of ourselves just yet. Being a spin-off in the Grand Battle line, the gameplay loop doesn't change at all here. The only drastic change is that the food system had to be replaced with a bomb stock gauge. It's an overdramatic name for a simple design. Standard attacks and blocks will fill up the gauge, allowing you to use your special move. It seems like the food system was a bit too demanding for the Wonder Swan's capabilities. Outside of that, everything else is just visuals. Arguably, the finishers are the only aspect that have suffered a downgrade in this regard. There was a certain charm to the 3D animations, but now they are just sprite work. They still look good, that's not what I'm saying, but executing a finisher doesn't quite hit the same when it's just an image followed by damage. Unfortunately, this entry dropped the cast from 24 down to only 13 playable characters, making it the smallest roster of all the series. Everyone who is in Alabasta is kept with the exclusion of Karu, while everyone else is omitted. Karu may have actually even been intended to be in this game, as his character sprites and animations are seen during the credits, but unfortunately it was not meant to be.
スワンのグラバットでいつも家で遊ぶ蛍原くんも自分のキャラを戦いの中でパワーアップ今ではご覧の通りグランドバトルスワンコロシアムワンダースワン
Grand Battle 3 marked a new change for the series. Thanks to the 6th generation of consoles, the developers were able to completely overhaul the 2.5D graphics and gameplay and venture into the fully 3D world of fighters. Now you could actually move around a stage to avoid your opponent instead of being stuck on a two-dimensional plane. On a surface level, not much has actually changed about how this game is played. The controls and rule set down to the specials and systems put in place are all exactly the same. However, the main draw of this game at the time was the 3D world. Maps, both old and new, were completely rebuilt to simultaneously feel familiar, but give you an experience you couldn't have from their past titles. On top of that, most of the characters' movesets were also given an update to better fit the feel of 3D combat, and you could tell they really hit their stride with this entry. Grand Battle 1 and 2 didn't feel bad, but it definitely felt like they were trying to copy someone else's blueprint. But Grand Battle 3 feels like it was always what they were trying to do, just now they were able to do it. Being yet another 1 year after the last game's release, the crew was now in Skypiea, giving Grand Battle 3 its new central focus. Unfortunately, the game's roster yet again drops from 2's 24 playable characters to only 16 for this game, with only 4 new ones. Wiper, Ohm, Eneru, and Hina are all brand new additions, but most of the Alabasta and East Blue roster has been dropped completely. However, a lot of leeway has to be given for the drop in cast. Again, due to the graphical overhaul, everyone has pretty much been given new character models and redesigns, looking and playing much better than their predecessors. There's really not that much to say about Grand Battle 3. It's a quality improvement across the board, keeping everything the same, but improving where it mattered. While this doesn't mark the end for the Grand Battle series, I'm yet again going to pause covering the sequels for now, and return to them a little later in this video, as there's some history that needs to be covered in between. You'll see. One trend that has always been prevalent within gaming is that when a company is doing something extremely well and successful, others will always be there to try and make their own version. For the longest time, Nintendo was king. They were always on what felt like the cutting edge of gameplay and development for their titles, trying new things, branching out, and delivering gameplay experiences no other developers were providing. But one of the most impressive things they managed to do was taking their established characters and putting them in completely new genres. These were the spin-off games, characters taken out of their original series to do something completely different. These are how you ended up with the Mario sports games, Mario Kart, and relevant to this title, Mario Party. Mario Party was running wild on the GameCube in the early 2000s. 4, 5, 6, and 7 were released 1 year after the other, and with the exclusion of 6, they all sold over 2 million copies. Because of the success and popularity of these titles, what felt like everyone was making their own sort of party game. Take whatever franchise you want, build a tabletop board, add some minigames, and bam, you have a product. There were also a ton of kart racers at the time, thanks to Mario Kart as well, but surprisingly, One Piece has never made any sort of racing game. Probably for the better. But they did make a party game. While the Treasure Wars games were not good, to say the least, Treasure Battle for the GameCube was a step forward for their party game attempts. There is technically a story, because I guess they needed something to justify the game's existence. There's a new character named Rocky Hattori. He's a reporter for the Blueberry Times. He admires pirates and is against how the Marines rule over pirate-related news. So he's hoping to reveal their true nature by organizing a treasure battle where everyone can compete in a series of athletic competitions to hopefully attain a grand prize he's offering. The reward? Treasure card, said to be able to grant any wish. If ever there was a promotion for One Piece collectible cards they were making, then this sure as hell is the biggest marketing push ever. Many One Piece games do actually have a collectible card system, but it's usually just there for you to complete. This game said, no, we are promoting these cards no matter what. It's the greatest treasure ever. Everyone wants them. So Rocky invited all the pirates he's been covering, mostly the East Blue and Alabasta characters, to compete for the cards and reveal their story. This game is a bit of a mix between both a party game and a fighting game. There's only 7 minigames that make up this entire title, but there are 22 different characters. All 7 minigames involve the ability to fight, so you're not just playing the exact same character in a different skin like Mario Party. Each character comes equipped with their own movesets and stats they excel in. So weirdly enough, the replayability doesn't come from the game modes themselves, but which character you're playing in them. As stated, there are 7 minigames, all of which involve fighting. The first one is Treasure Battle, in which 2 teams of 2 try to claim a treasure in the middle of the map and bring it to their designated boxing ring. You can pass the chest, throw the chest, or even attack with it, but once the treasure chest is in the ring, a ship will begin coming to shore. The game ends when the ship makes land. Obviously, it's your objective to physically attack your opponents to steal the chest from them. It can be fairly short, especially if you're against CPU opponents. So I'd imagine with 4 human players, the game is much more competitive. The second game mode is Kung Fu Survival, where both teams are placed on a small island and tasked with defeating the largest number of dugongs. This one I feel pretty bad for the dugongs. Yeah, they slightly attack, but for the most part, this is a one-sided massacre as you slaughter and beat these poor defenseless animals. Cross country is probably the most fun. You're still in teams of 2, but it's an individual race to the end of each stage. You'll progress along an obstacle course in sections and be scored based on where you place against the others. You're still able to attack and mess the others up, so it really is a game on whether you just want to be performance-based and try to run to the end, or if you want to cause mayhem and risk a worse position. Honestly, this one is pretty fun and replayable. Pirate soccer is exactly what it sounds like. It's pirates playing soccer. The ball is made of metal and is dangerous, so if it hits you, it hurts and stuns you for a little bit. Other than that, it's pretty generic. Treasure Hunt might be the worst. It's a game of RNG as you wander around the map until an arrow appears and directs you towards a hidden treasure. You're just walking around a map blind. And finally, there is Teamwork Rally. It's a relay race, but instead of batons, you use a treasure chest. I really had a hard time with this one because I didn't know the controls. Apparently, throwing the chest is different to passing it. So I would just throw the chest over and over again, hoping Vivi would pick it up. Or I was hoping I would just throw it the correct strength and she would catch it. But she never did. But I did figure out how to pass right at the end, so that was fun. The other characters are unlocked via the card system. By playing through the story mode, where you just play through these minigames, at the end of each of them you'll be given a card. When the correct cards have been collected, you will unlock the others to play. It's not the worst game, especially when you're comparing it to Treasure Wars, but there's a lot to be desired here. Considering this is not a fighting game, the combat is very basic, and there are very few minigames that, after 3 or so playthroughs, you're pretty much ready to be done with it. Maybe with other 3 friends it could be a fun time, but it's not meant to be played single player, I can tell you that.
GameCube
ワンピースがゲームキューブに上陸よ。
お宝奪ってゴールを目指せ。
カードゲームをコレクションよ。
いろんなゲームも盛りだくさん。
ワンピーストレジャーバトル大ヒット中。
Moving over to the Game Boy Advance, we start things off with the great hidden treasure of Nanatsu Island. It's yet another original story that takes place in a unique location. When the Straw Hats are sailing, a storm winds up coming through and scattering everyone across a mysterious island. Turns out the place has been taken over by the Simon Pirates. They're led by a man aptly named Simon who believes that he has been special from birth and thus maintains the belief that he should be king of the world. He learnt of the treasure of Nanatsu Island that could help him attain this rule, and so began luring pirates there so he could claim the treasure for himself. I can't speak to the quality of storytelling within this game because it is all in Japanese, and unfortunately, a translation doesn't exist. But it does at the very least sound intriguing. I always have to give a One Piece game credit for trying to tell an original story instead of just rehashing the events from the show. Outside of the Straw Hats, damn near every character you encounter is original, and there's a healthy number of Simon Pirates. The gameplay isn't half bad either. It's a turn-based RPG that takes place on a grid battlefield. You're allowed 3 characters and you're free to move around the board per your character's range. After you move, you can do all the typical things: attack, defend, or use an item. The battle system also features a rhythm type element to it. When you're attacking, if you press the A button in timing with your character's attack, it will allow you an up to 4-hit combo for extra damage. It's not the most game-changing feature, but it adds an extra layer to keep you engaged. There are also obstacles that can appear on the field. Some can be attacked and launched into the opponent, others used for cover. I definitely think it's much more fun to actually play than you might think from watching it. It's a title that I would actually like to return to if a translation ever existed.
それは仕組まれた冒険だった。鍵を握るは悪魔の実、迫り来る悪の陰謀を暴け。ワンピース七つ島の大秘宝。
One Piece Aim, the King of Berry, is quite a fascinating game, and one that I've never experienced anything like. It was released in 2003 for the Game Boy Advance, and functions like a single-player board game. One Piece is no stranger to taking the board game formula and turning that into a product. But traditionally, board games are you versus other players, even if CPU controlled. But King of Berry is like a 4-player co-op board game. You're not against the other 3 players, you're all working together. After the Going Merry crashes into an iceberg, damaging the figurehead, the crew needs money to repair the ship. Being their treasurer, Nami tasks everyone, excluding Robin, to accrue the needed funds. You can choose between either Luffy, Zoro, Usopp, or Chopper to play as. But regardless of who you pick, you'll only play as one of them. Gameplay consists of rolling a dice and moving around a board. There will be islands scattered around, largely consisting of bosses you must face. In this regard, it's very much like an RPG. You can attack, use items, and all those things. By defeating these bosses and collecting cards along the way, you will slowly but surely accrue the money Nami wants, which will advance the story. The crazy thing is, the board game aspect feels completely unnecessary. You only control one of the 4 characters, meaning where the others move, what they do, how they fight the bosses. You're just watching, which inherently isn't a problem, but you're all working together. It's a collaborative effort. The whole board game format is supposed to be designed to be a competition. Remove the competition and it loses its purpose. Maybe the rules were lost in translation on me and I didn't actually grasp what was going on, but at no point were the CPUs sabotaging any of the other players. So from what I could tell, it was just a single-player board game.
Game Boy Advance。
ゴッドのワンピースはド迫力バトルだ。どんどん出てくる新キャラクター。スキルだろ。賞金稼ぎまくりパーティーゲームワンピース目指せキングオブベリー。タクシキャラもいっぱい。知り合いじゃなくて友達じゃなくて俺たちはファミリー。親戚じゃなくて兄弟じゃない俺たちはファミリー。Now this is an intro. It's one of the few songs the Straw Hats all sing together. We all have probably heard the We Are version they do, as well as Bing Sake. But there are a handful of other songs the crew sing together that aren't played nearly as often. This one is called Family. It appears at the end of several of the TV specials and was even used as a makeshift ending for episode 128 randomly. But this was the first time I heard it, and I loved it. They even include Robin in this version since she wasn't part of the crew when it was initially created. I recommend going on YouTube and watching the full intro to this game because it's a whole 3-minute montage while they sing. It really makes this game stand out because traditionally most of these games will either play one of the intros used for the series, which is always welcome, I love those songs, or they'll play some sort of instrumental 8-bit version or something, or just have nothing altogether. Like, this one caught me off guard in a good way. And it makes a lot of sense because while you may have never heard of this game, chances are a lot of you are probably familiar with Ocean's Dream.
You'd be forgiven if it doesn't sound familiar. It was a 5-episode filler arc exclusive to the anime that took place following Long Ring Long Land. It was a story about a mysterious boy with a seahorse-like instrument who winds up erasing all of the Straw Hats' memories. Robin was the only one unaffected because she was awake that night reading one of her books. Without any of their memories, none of the Straw Hats know who the others are, and the entire arc follows Robin in her effort to not only figure out what went wrong, but hopefully return everyone's memories. It's an interesting concept, considering Robin was not only a fairly recent addition to the crew at the time, meaning she doesn't actually know that much about everyone, but also because she has some memories herself she might have preferred be completely erased. It's not a fondly regarded or even remembered filler arc in the eyes of many, as most of it can be seen as a waste of time, retreading old ground and overall not contributing to the development of anyone. But what makes the Ocean's Dream game different to all the rest is that the game wasn't based off of this arc. The arc was based off of the game. It's one of the rare instances, if not the only one, where an original story made for a video game got translated into the anime. Ocean's Dream was released on May 1st, 2003 for the PlayStation, a whole 2 years prior to its anime debut. While the plot of the game remains virtually the same in that the strange boy and his seahorse steal the memories of the Straw Hats, where the alteration came in is that in the game, Robin also has her memories taken away. In the game, Bon Clay is the one who shows up to help our characters remember, once again showing he is a true one and a real member of the crew, even if not permanent. The game more so lends to the concept of their memories being taken away and used against them. Anytime the games want to bring in past foes, there always has to be an angle. Otherwise, the story's just going to be a recap, and we don't need any more of those. Considering there is a devil fruit in play, the characters' memories can be used against them. At least that's what I think happens, considering it is all in Japanese. There's a decent amount of quality to this game. Original animation, voice acting, the sprite work looks really good. The only problem is the gameplay. It's practically a card game with rhythm elements. You can choose whether you want to attack or defend or heal. Certain actions require the use of heat, and there are some wacky cards that shake things up a bit. You're pretty much just picking cards and watching the same animations over and over again. It can be pretty slow and boring, unfortunately. It's sad because I would assume this game is a much more fully realized version of the Ocean's Dream story. It makes sense why so much was cut for the anime. As much as I'm sure people would have loved to see Bon Clay again, I do like the small angle they approached with Robin and her standing within the crew at the time. At best, the anime made the arc a neat thought experiment as opposed to a full story like the game. But fortunately, 2 years later, in April of 2005, Dragon Dream came out for the Game Boy Advance. It's a handheld remake of Ocean's Dream. I don't know why they changed the name. It retains the basic plot of the original, but now includes elements from Sky Island and Long Ring Long Land now that they were further ahead. It was released 2 months after the arc had officially aired as part of the anime, making it the perfect promotional material at the time. This game honestly fixes the biggest problem the original had with the gameplay. The card system was completely removed, and now you actually get to take control of the characters and fight freely. There are only 2 buttons on the Game Boy Advance, making combat very limited, but there are still plenty of movesets that you can mix and match as you progress through the game. There's even some fights where you can choose multiple characters and switch between them during battle. Like, everything may look a little goofy because of the character models, but honestly, this is a fun game. Despite being entirely in Japanese, the progression is very straightforward and easy to understand. I couldn't figure out what the hell I was doing in the original, but here it was so easy. You even have to play games of Who's That Pokemon as you go around and collect characters and items. To either progress through the story or unlock new movesets, you have to match the silhouettes with the items you collected. The only downside, if I had to guess, is that the story probably took a big hit. Due to being on a handheld console, there's no voice acting, no animations, and I would imagine the story got abridged quite heavily. But despite not having an English release, this is one of the Japanese exclusive titles that you can play without understanding a single word since it's so straightforward. Dragon's Dream is a definite recommend.
Game Boy Advance
このだものなんだっけアクション RPG で失った記憶を取り戻せワンピースドラゴンドリーム思い出した
In 2003, Bandai would release their final One Piece game for the WonderSwan color with Chopper's Big Adventure. You want to talk about going out on a high note, then this is it. Relative to One Piece games, this title did a lot of unique things that I wish more entries weren't afraid to do. Firstly, this is Chopper's Big Adventure. It's a game that Chopper is prominently at the forefront of. Yeah, all of the other Straw Hats are here, but it's made clear from the get-go that this is a story about him. Do you know how many other games do that in this video? Be named after and focus on a different character? None. This is the only one. There's no Sanji's cooking game or anything where any of the other Straw Hats take on the main character role. There have been a few where new characters are introduced and you play as them, but what I'm talking about is the Straw Hats. This is the only one that changed the dynamic in an original way, and this game proves how creative a story can get with that concept. When the Straw Hats travel to a mysterious island, they are all unexpectedly turned into animals overnight. Luffy gets turned into a monkey, Zoro a tiger, Nami a cat, Sanji a fox, Usopp a kappa, and Robin a parrot. Only Chopper remains the same. Already being a human-animal hybrid, he remains completely unchanged, now making him the most experienced Straw Hat in an unusual situation. You want to talk about a fun story concept, and one that would have made for a great filler in the anime like the Ocean's Dream game? Then this was it. They should have translated this into a filler arc. Now, interestingly enough, despite everyone being turned into animals, technically speaking, only Luffy and Nami are the correct animals. I say this because Oda had previously been asked in the SBS section of Volume 20 which animals the Straw Hats most resemble, and he gave his answer. He said Luffy was a monkey, Nami a cat, Zoro a shark, Usopp an armadillo, and Sanji's a duck. In the SBS of Volume 50, he added the other Straw Hats, saying Robin's a crane, Frankie's a bucking bull, and Brooks a horse. It's not like, oh my god, they messed up the animals, the whole experience is ruined. It affects nothing. It's just a fun fact. I actually like the changes they made. Zoro being a shark would severely hinder his gameplay and mobility in this game. He's had a lot of moves named after animals, but to me some of his most memorable were his lion attacks. And Usopp being a kappa is kinda just perfect. The gameplay is similar to a roguelike in many ways, shockingly. You explore dungeons, fight enemies along the way, maybe encounter a boss here and there, earn XP while you try to gain access to the next area. There are also small little challenges that can occur in each zone to break up the gameplay. The other characters can accompany you into battle, whether in their human or animal forms, but most of the time they're not actually needed, as this game isn't exactly hard. Difficulty-wise, this game is easy, like child's play easy. It's not the most challenging, but it doesn't take away from the fun that is presented here anyway. The whole game just feels distinct, and I think that's due a large part thanks to the art direction. I love the artwork of this game. In my opinion, it's the best One Piece has looked on the WonderSwan. You're hard-pressed to get this confused with any other game. I'd compare it to the likes of the movies, actually. One Piece games do this unfortunate thing where the Straw Hats are almost always in their default outfits, making the adventures they're going on feel much smaller in scale. But any One Piece fan can attest to the outfits and wardrobe being a large factor in making a new arc feel different. Every arc, the characters are in different clothes to match the settings and design of the new location. And the same goes for the movies. Just by looking at how everyone's dressed, you know what the product is. It may not be canon to the story, but at least they dressed everyone up differently. And this game does that. To me, the best One Piece games all have that extra element. You're never gonna look at Sanji as a sly fox and think, I just don't know where that's from. It makes this adventure feel different and stand out amongst the crowd, and to me that's a huge commendation for this game. One Piece Going Baseball was a Japanese-only release for the Game Boy Advance in 2004. It's exactly what you'd expect. A One Piece skin baseball game. It's the only sports game to date that has used the IP, which both is and is not shocking. Interestingly enough, Going Baseball is actually connected to a One Piece movie that came out in 2004 known as The Cursed Holy Sword. Believe it or not, baseball has nothing to do with that movie. But an animated short was included alongside it called Take Aim, the Pirate Baseball King, in which the Straw Hats go up against the Fishmen Pirates in a game of baseball, all while Buggy and Bon Clay act as the announcers. The short's only 5 minutes long, but this, alongside the movie having released only 5 days before this game, may as well have been a promotion to push Going Baseball into the eyes of the viewers. A password is even included in the short which unlocks Power Luffy. In the game, you can pick between one of 8 teams: the Straw Hats, the East Blue team, the Grand Line team, the Marines, the Alabasta team, Baroque Works, Skypiea, or the Red Hair team, which unlocks after you beat all of the others. I love how each character is tried to be given their own personality in either the way they bat or the bat that they use. In a game that doesn't do much, it tries to make the most out of it. And the same goes for the artwork. Seeing all of these characters in baseball attire that you otherwise never see them wearing is both comedically hilarious and incredibly endearing. I mean, look at Miss Doublefinger. She is rockin' that outfit. And the Marines, it's like a mandatory workplace sporting event. You're allowed to pick whatever team you want to play as, but you're restricted to whoever is on their given team, so you don't have to worry about mixing and matching and making sure you're choosing the correct players. The game is very straightforward and simple in that regard. It's like Wii Sports Baseball. You can bat and you can pitch, but everything else is driven by the computer. Whether or not they catch the ball and who they throw it to is all done by itself. So your main objective is to focus on hitting the ball and striking the other team out. But because this is a One Piece skinned game, there are some extra quirks. Pitchers are all able to do the same subset of skills, which makes the ball increasingly difficult to hit. But when it comes to batting, each character has their own special move, allowing for an almost guaranteed home run if you hit the ball correctly. It's a small and charming game that plays surprisingly well. A lot of these older games do not hold up, but there was a simplicity to Going Baseball that has stood the test of time.
Game Boy Advance.
海賊野球プレイボール強豪チームをなぎ倒せ目指せ海賊野球王ワンピースゴーイングベースボール
One Piece Round the Land for the PS2. This one definitely stands out in terms of its uniqueness. It's a 3D side-scroller of all things, where your main objective is to get to the goal at the end of the right side of the screen. There are your standard enemies on the path that you can attack with either a standard or special skill that takes longer to use. But like most side-scrollers, you don't actually have to fight the enemies. Each map does also have a variety of collectibles, however. There's always a set amount of balloons scattered around each map, and as you collect them, you can earn a little bit of money each time. When you complete the level, it'll give you a percentage of how many you got and give you a monetary reward for doing so. There are also treasure chests that you can find and have to carry to the end of the level to receive a hefty lump sum. This game definitely feels like it couldn't really decide on whether it wanted to focus on the side-scrolling aspect or the combat. Because of that, you wind up with a wonky middle ground where you can't really speedrun the levels if you tried, and killing the enemies can sometimes feel forced upon you. I'll give it its credit, it's the only one of its kind, and it beats repeating the same formula over and over again. It shows the developers were willing to try different things. Round the Land tells an original story, but unfortunately, due to the lack of an English translation, I struggle to find much to say about it. From what I can gather, it centers around a new character named Blyu. He's in search of a legend that, I think, can fulfill some sort of dream of his. He had the idea to open a hotel and send pirates in search of the treasure for him, but he didn't have any customers. That was until Luffy and the others arrived, and so he decided to use them. He kidnaps Vivi and forces the Straw Hats to battle their old foes in a resort arc-themed challenge, hence the gimmicky look to everything. And that's why all of the Straw Hats' old enemies are here. Some of that might be wrong, but it seems to check out for the most part. Interestingly enough, Blyu, while he is original to this game, is actually a giant who ate the mini fruit, which gives him the power to shrink. That might actually sound familiar to those who watch the anime, because there was a character introduced later on in the Z's Ambition arc named Lily Stomach, who is pretty much the same character. They're both giants who ate the mini fruit, and without spoiling either story, both have some connection to Dory and Bragi. It's just kinda wild seeing how despite 8 years separating both of these characters, they pretty much came up with the same type of story and use for the devil fruit in supplemental content. I do gotta give a special shout out to the Bon Voyage-esque intro they do for all of the characters here. I always loved that sequence in the anime, and seeing a nod to that put the largest of smiles on my face. In the early 2000s, something very important was happening with One Piece in the West. A bidding war was going on to see who was going to obtain the rights and license the series to create an official English dub. You've probably noticed by now, but every game that I've covered has almost always been a Japan exclusive, with 1 or 2 having a European release. But North American audiences hadn't really been exposed to One Piece through many official means. The show wasn't a thing yet, let alone being distributed, and if you wanted to read the manga, the best way was probably through Shonen Jump magazines, who were the first to begin publishing English translations. But that started in 2002. One Piece was very much in its infancy of popularity in the West, but it was clear that it was insanely popular in Japan, and bringing products overseas was already a proven model. Funimation was one of the big favorites going into the bidding war. They had already been airing Dragon Ball, which people were eating up, and they were so confident that they were going to obtain the rights that they even registered a URL for One Piece despite not owning it yet. And in June of 2004, 4Kids announced that they had successfully licensed the series. 4Kids was no joke. They had some heavy hitters under their belt. Pokemon, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Sonic X, Kirby right back at ya. 4Kids felt on top of the world in the early to mid 2000s, and One Piece was going to elevate them to even higher states of notoriety.
4 adventurers in search of their dreams. Wealth.
It's mine! All this gold is mine!
Fame.
All I want is to be the greatest swordsman in the world.
Fortune.
I'm gonna find One Piece!
And... We'll get back to you. Sure, they're dreaming. Got a problem with that? One Piece. Only on 4Kids TV.
I'm going to be king of the pirates!
Right.
Now, I'm not here to discuss the 4Kids version of One Piece. That honestly could be an entirely separate video in and of itself, and quite frankly, I could. It's the version that I grew up with, and I have a lot to say even in defense of it. So if that's a video you'd like to see, a history of the 4Kids version of One Piece, then leave a comment below. But the reason 4Kids is so important in a video about One Piece games is because their licensing and distribution of the series wasn't restricted to only the anime. They had a heavy hand in the games that were brought over to the West as well. Because of that, any One Piece game at the time that got a North American release was treated as though it was their product. It of course featured their voice actors, but more prominently featured the changes that they made to the series as well. The renaming of certain characters like Zoro to Zolo, Ace to Trace, Smoker to Chaser were all carried over along with any other alterations. It can be a point of confusion for many modern One Piece fans who didn't didn't grow up in this era and are not familiar with 4Kids' version of the series. Nowadays, you have easy access to whichever iteration you wish to consume, whether it's the dub, sub, or manga, but back then, 4Kids had a vice grip on the early years of One Piece in the West. As a result, there's similarly an era of One Piece games that fall into this bubble. The first was Grand Battle Rush, or simply Grand Battle in the West. It's the 5th installment of the Grand Battle series, but the first one North American audiences got to experience, hence why they dropped the numbers and just decided to call it Grand Battle. In my opinion, this is where the series really found the right formula for what it was going for. Gameplay feels so much more improved compared to 3. The controls feel tighter and more responsive, and overall, the gameplay is faster. While many of the characters' combos are largely the same, they string together more fluidly in this game for a faster-paced experience, and that's what you want. It's not your typical competitive fighter where everything is on equal ground and you have a fair fight every single match. There's an arcadey unfairness to everything, with items constantly spawning full of power-ups so you can run away and keep throwing things at your opponent until you choose to engage. The stages are full of hazards damaging you can call in support characters to do the work for you. None of these things are new, but the game made it feel more natural than ever before. Now not only being 1 but 2 years since the last Grand Battle's release, the story was now through Long Ring Long Land, meaning there were new characters added to the roster. Foxy, Aokiji, there were two new characters were added to the roster. This game did fix many of the shortcomings by re-adding most of the characters that were taken out of the last game. Most of the East Blue villains like Buggy, Kuro, Don Krieg, and Arlong make a return, but for some reason they removed the Skypiea characters, leaving only Eneru. But yet again, there seems to have been some sort of graphical overhaul, so I suppose I'll forgive them once more. In total, this game has 19 playable characters. But for the first time, they also expanded past the typical battle game modes and added a Davy Back game mode, which consists of small mini-games you compete in against the Foxy Pirates. In it, you choose 3 characters to compete in a 3-coin game. There's a total of 6 different mini-games. Box Crusher tasks you with destroying 300 boxes within 60 seconds. During the donut race, you must attack the Foxy Pirates who are shooting cannons at your crew. Groggy Ring is where you use Gaimon in this case, who is the ball to score points. Poor Gaimon. Snow Cleaning, you must clean up snow by either attacking it or moving around. This one is pretty bad. Custom Battle, you must fight a CPU opponent with some modifier in play, and probably the hardest one in my opinion is Woot Smash, where you have to fight and defeat Don Krieg on the Baratier stage in 60 seconds. But his health is invisible, and he has a permanent shield active, meaning you cannot stun lock him. It's what I imagine fighting Don Krieg would actually be like, because it feels like your attacks are doing nothing while he tosses you around, beating you with his mighty battle spear. It's a challenging one, to say the least, and one I struggle to win consistently. Per the Davy Back rules, at the end of each minigame, the winner gets to steal 1 support character from the enemy team, which they may use in the subsequent games. It's not the most useful because everyone already comes with a support character, so if you like the way they play, then there's not much use in choosing a different one. It can be hard when you lose and your support is taken from you, leaving you without one for the next challenge. The third and final round is always a fight against Foxy. The rules are normal, except Foxy always has an extra health bar when he's defeated, and once that second health bar activates, he has permanent heat and infinite food charges. Needless to say, it's not exactly fair, but that's Foxy for you. The whole game is best 2 out of 3, so all you have to do is win 2 of the challenges, which can be pretty simple. Only 2 of the 6 games are played each time, because the third is always the same. If you lose your first 2 challenges, then it doesn't matter whether or not you win the final fight. You'll still lose the game overall, which can be pretty frustrating. But this whole game mode is very short, maybe like 10 minutes. So it's not exactly wasting your time, but there's also not the most replayability. Aside from that, it's the Grand Battle game you would expect from the franchise. Except the English release was a little different. As I mentioned earlier, 4Kids was very hands-on when it came to their license and distribution of One Piece. They couldn't just translate the game into English and call it a day. They didn't want their show to get spoiled by supplemental material being further ahead than they were. Grand Battle Rush has elements through Long Ring Long Land, and 4Kids had just started Drum Island. Neither Chopper nor Robin were part of the crew just yet, meaning 4Kids removed any and all dialogue or cutscenes that even hinted at them having a familiarity with the Straw Hats. Robin's name was even completely taken out, as she's only referred to as Miss Sunday. And as you could imagine, Eneru, Foxy, and Aokiji were completely removed from the game. The Davy Back Fight game mode is now simply called Mini Games. It still functions the exact same, but instead of the Foxy Pirates, the game mode is instead run by the Usopp Pirates. Let me tell you, this game mode will quickly make you hate Usopp. The arrogance and annoyance works with Foxy because he's a villain and you're supposed to hate him. This just makes Usopp so annoying. Some of the Foxy assets are still in the game, like the masks on some of the pirates, but the costumes relative to this arc are all gone as well. Even the intro that plays when you boot up the game had to be completely scrapped because there was so much footage of Alabasta and Foxy and Eneru that it was just more efficient to replace the whole thing instead of trying to edit around it. But they did make the brilliant decision of just replacing it with the 4Kids pirate rap theme song, which if you know, then you know it's one of the best. It must have been some sort of earlier iteration of the theme song that had different lyrics they were testing with. I'm so used to the version that aired alongside the show that the Grand Battle variant caught me off guard. For those of you who haven't heard how it's different, here's a listen to both of them for those curious.
Here's how the story goes, we find out about a treasure in the Grand Line, there's no doubt. The pirate whose eye is on it, he'll sing, I'll be king of the pirates, I'm gonna be king. Here's how the story goes, we find out about a treasure in the Grand Line, there's no doubt. The pirate whose eye is on it, he'll sing, I'll be king, I'll be pirate king. His name's Zolo, he's just like a samurai and a L-A-D-Y, Nami's not shy. The pirate crew coming through, doing their thing with the king of the pirates, he's gonna be king. His name's Zolo, he's a samurai and a L-A-D-Y, Nami the slide. The pirate crew coming through, doing their thing with the king gonna be pirate king.
A fun fact is that they also didn't censor the blood from Zoro's cuts in the game's intro like they did for the show. Overall, it's unfortunate that content was removed from the North American release, but overall, it's still a very good game. But something 4Kids did that still has yet to be done to this day was create an entirely original One Piece game exclusive to North America. One Piece for the Game Boy Advance. Surprisingly, this is the only game in this entire history that is simply called One Piece. It's a side-scrolling action-adventure platformer that loosely adapts the events from the East Blue Saga. The game was developed by Dimps Corporation, the same people who did Swan Colosseum. Which, if you remember from that segment, I said how the sprite work and animations done for that game was so good it wasn't the last time they would be used. Well, that's where this game comes in. As a result of Swan Colosseum, this game didn't have to be built from the ground up. Many of the sprites and animations were taken directly from that title and used here. At least when it comes to Luffy. This game's biggest downside is that for some reason you're only able to play as him. All of the others are still in this game and can even be used for a support attack, but you can only walk around and play this game as Luffy. It's such a strange thing considering just how everyone was already programmed to be playable. It may be because this game is designed around Luffy. There are poles that you constantly need to grab onto to reach certain areas, cannons that shoot him around, which logistically are only for him. If you were playing as anyone else, so much of this game would be inaccessible that even if you could switch characters, you'd be doing it all the time just to get to the next area. This game was unfortunately designed to be played as only one character. But with that small qualm out of the way, This is a really good game, considering that all of the animations and combat was already created for what was meant to be a competitive fighting game. Taking that and putting it inside of an action side-scroller resulted in fun single-player gameplay. Movement and action all control really well as it was supposed to. Story is limited to a few dialogue bubbles to push things forward, but for the most part, this game understands that playing the game is the main draw, not trying to retell the story. There's a good amount of difficulty to it as well. Games like this always did have quite the difficulty spike, so don't expect to just walk through the whole thing like it's nothing. That is the most dramatic intro I have ever heard in my entire life, and the last thing I would have expected from a One Piece game. If this was Dark Souls but One Piece, I think it would be perfect, but it's not. This is fighting for One Piece. Taking a brief step away from 4Kids, we return to yet another Japanese exclusive title. Developed by Flat Out, this game was released in 2005 for the PlayStation 2. Unlike the Gigant Battle series, which adopted a much more chibi art style with an arcadey format to combat, Fighting for One Piece is a true-to-form fighting game. Everything is played on a 2D plane. No items, no gimmicks, just button and directional combos. There's a total of 13 playable characters, the 8 Straw Hats along with Smoker, Ace, Crocodile, Aokiji, and Eneru. I will add that I do quite like the character models in this game. While I have been playing a lot of Gigant Battle for this video, even modern One Piece games have a very cartoony and anime-esque aesthetic. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but this game uniquely has quite a more realistic approach comparatively when it comes to the characters that no other One Piece game seems to have tried to replicate. Maybe it's just the PS2 graphics at play, but I quite enjoy the aesthetics of this game. You have a choice between 8 stages and yeah, it's a fighting game. Look, I'm not great at skill-based fighting games, this much I can acknowledge, but traditionally against CPU opponents, I can do well enough. I'm not stringing together no fancy combos, but some basic beginner-level gameplay that isn't straight-up button mashing. But here, I struggled. I don't know if it's the game being bad or just me really being bad, but fortunately I didn't have to endure hours upon hours of this because everything is straightforward and given to you up front. There's no story mode or anything, it just puts you into an arena and says fight. So if you're into fighting games, then maybe this is up your alley for a friendly 1v1. Otherwise, stick to the more arcadey games.
One Piece リアルファイト選ばれし強者どもよ本格格闘の真髄を体感せよ夢の真剣勝負ファイティングフォーワンピース
One Piece Pirates Carnival was released for the GameCube and PS2 in 2005. This game's artwork takes many of the same assets from Round the Land's cover and repurposes them here. Despite what you may think, unlike the other competitors just trying to make Mario Party clones, despite having no right to even try, One Piece already did have a leg in this realm thanks to the Davy Bat games. The Straw Hats' encounter with the Foxy Pirates was already a party game in and of itself, so it made turning that into a video game a not-so-strange thing. Now, this game doesn't revolve around the Foxy Pirates, but they are prevalent in the happenings and circumstances of the game. Or at least I would say so if they were kept in the game. Similar to Gigant Battle Rush, 4Kids was very hands-on with this title. As a result, a lot of stuff got removed that they didn't want spoiled. As I've mentioned before, considering they never made it to Skypiea, everything that came out after was also a problem. Considering this game goes so far as Enies Lobby is almost crazy to think about for 2005. I didn't get to experience Water 7 until almost a decade later, where it finally aired on Toonami. So almost everything from Skypiea to Enies Lobby was taken out of the North American release of this game. These include the Foxy Pirates, which were a huge driving factor for this game, as well as Frankie and CP9 and any other characters who showed up that they didn't introduce. Django and the Black Cat Pirates take on the role of Foxy and his crew, but you could still see some of the Foxy Pirate assets in the background of some of these games. The main form of gameplay is actually fairly different different to Mario Party. You don't take control of a character and walk around a large set piece, instead it's almost more of a strategy game with a large amount of randomness tied in. The board consists of a series of panels all covered by Jolly Rogers. Each turn, a player must turn over one of the panels, unveiling one of 3 variants: normal, captain, or event panels. Normal spaces are the most common. Upon uncovering, the player must choose one of 3 minigames which everyone will compete in. Normal panels are always a free-for-all, and whoever wins the minigame claims the panel. Captain panels are a bit more unique. These are effectively boss battles. It's a 1v3 against the person who picked the card. The captain will take control over which boss was unveiled and go against the other players. While the other 3 are teaming up to prevent the captain from winning, that's ultimately not good enough. If the captain loses, it's whoever performed best in the minigame that will claim the panel. So the 3 players are still technically competing against each other. Captain panels always come in pairs, meaning there's always 2 on the game board, and claiming one will automatically give you the other for free. And thirdly, there are event panels. There are no minigames associated with these, instead some sort of effect is immediately put into play. Friends such as Gaimon or Kaya will give the player money, Marines like Morgan or Tashigi will take money away, or you can trigger a Davy back fight. These panels allow you to try and steal other players' captain panels by challenging them to a minigame. Unlike the original Captain's game where you play as the card's character, when challenged via a Davy back fight, the Straw Hat in possession of the panel will have a specific minigame tied to them that you play. Depending on who wins, you can either steal or retain the spot on the board. There's also a halftime game. Halfway through the game, everyone is forced to compete in a 2v2 minigame in which first and third place will be teamed up against second and fourth. The game has no effect on the panels, but the winner will be awarded 10 million berries. And that's ultimately how you win. Panels will all have currency tied to them, and the more panels you have, the more berry, etc. You can earn more berries through other means as well, such as individual performances during a minigame and the quality of the panel you have. You're also able to just steal other players' panels by surrounding them, which can lead to massive chain reactions. The rules can be a bit overwhelming and confusing, especially when you explain them just the way I did. But once you understand them, the skill ceiling is decently high, and I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. In my opinion, what makes a good party game is how even if you're good at the game, someone who's never played it before can still have success due to the sheer amount of chance which keeps an assured victory out of your hands. But in Pirate Carnival, if someone knows what they're doing and is great at the minigames, they can easily run away with a game and it becomes completely one-sided. For a One Piece fan, it can be a fun party game if you have some friends to play with. It's a bit of a bummer that so much was removed. Realistically, the Japanese version might be the definitive way to play once you understand the rules to every minigame without having to read the instructions. The only exception might be the quiz game that was removed, which seems like it could be a lot of fun. But I don't know what kind of questions they ask, nor could I find a translation. But if you're a One Piece fan and have some friends who are as well, check it out for a game night.
ワンピースのパーティーゲームで遊べいっぱいゲームララララララみんなでゲームララララララとことん遊ぶ一緒遊ぶワンピースパイレーツカーニバル同時発売
But all of that pales in comparison to the near mastery of Grand Adventure for the GameCube and PS2. This would be the last game 4Kids got to translate, but they really went out in a blaze of glory with this one. God, if there is one thing you can never disrespect about 4Kids, it is the quality of their intros. They had no right to go so hard as frequently as they did across their products. When you load up this game and the music kicks in and out of nowhere Smoker starts dropping some bars.
A grand adventure for pirates. The journey to Straw Hat crew. Their enemies are mighty, but they will not give up on their dreams. A grand battle for pirates. The pirates gather to fight. Who will win is far from understood, but we will all watch the grand fight.
Dude, 10 10-year-old me, this was my Marineford. It's like, damn, everyone is here. That was the level of hype 4Kids was bringing to the table, and they brought the whole Thanksgiving feast. The box art of this game actually uses the image of Luffy from the cover of Fighting for One Piece, which was much more fitting for that game's tone. Luffy's serious and ready to fuck shit up face tonally fit the, for some reason, darker vibe that game was going for. But considering it never released outside of Japan, 4Kids probably thought it was fine to repurpose the artwork, even though it doesn't fit the tone they establish ever. But I mean, hey, it does go hard. Grand Adventure is the culmination of the entire Grand Battle series. You would think that to be a very logical statement to make. Of course, every game got better with each entry, that's the best case scenario. But what makes this game's success strange in many regards is that it didn't see a Japanese release. It's one of those strange instances where the game was developed and made in Japan, but never saw a release inside of it. And that's shocking because Grand Adventure really shakes up the formula. The game was back to a total of 24 playable characters, with those who had previously been removed in the last titles like Ace, Tashigi, and Vivi, just to name a few, being added back in. But they also, for the first time in the franchise's history, added Zeph and Kuina as playable characters. I always wondered why Zeph, even to this day, is never a playable character. Like, he was a captain who sailed the seas and raided ships and had a reputation for kicking people to death. Like, he was a capable guy. Yeah, he may be in his older years now, and losing a leg may have been the end of it, but he's still capable of kicking ass, literally. Aokiji and Foxy, who were removed from the last Grand Battle game, are still completely missing from this one. But if the cover art wasn't already evident enough, it seems like 4Kids also developed a fuck it mentality and decided to put in the Skypiea characters they removed from the last title to give this game more content. You know, for an arc that they would never reach, they did a really good job with the voice acting for those characters. If they were gonna put them in anyway, I don't know why they didn't just put Foxy and Aokiji back in as well. At this point, it seems like they didn't really matter. Gameplay is largely untouched, but they did add an extra layer to the secret attacks. Now, during it, they implemented a system of rock, paper, scissors, but instead renamed them Strength, Technique, and Wisdom. Both parties make a secret selection during the attack, and depending on the results, determine the success or failure of it triggering. A failure will just instantly end the whole move, making getting caught in it not a guaranteed punish. I like the system. It adds to the randomness and arcade-like feeling of these games. But Grand Adventure's main draw is the newly introduced Adventure Mode. It's a quasi-open world exploration where you travel from island to island, taking on different challenges in the order of the story. It's not as plain as simply playing through the story and fighting the computer on an equal battlefield. Most fights will actually impose upon you some sort of modifier. Maybe it's completing the fight within a certain time, maybe it'll give the opponent some sort of buff, or it'll tell you just to survive and not die. There are many modifiers in play during this mode to shake things up and make completing it not such an arduous chore. It also helps that there's now a leveling system. You can earn XP in this game mode to level up the characters and spec them with certain stats. You can upgrade your health, attack, defense, super attacks, support characters, or even the damage done from items. The game still features the now classic Grand Battle game mode, so if all you want to do is fight and compete, then it's still available. Grand Adventure is just more of everything from the Grand Battle series. More characters, more gameplay, more replayability. It really is the best the series has to offer. It's a rare win for 4Kids and their reputation with One Piece. It's undeniably a title worth giving a try. The One Piece Unlimited series. To me, this is as close as they've ever gotten to my ideal One Piece game. While Grand Adventure was my first experience with a One Piece video game and it was a 4Kids dubbed title, By this point, I had become fully aware of the battle between 4Kids and Funimation. Practically, I was forced to. 4Kids only ever got as far as Luluka Island, an impressive 104 episodes in total. But once that run ended, Toonami, as soon as the Jaya and Skypiea arc began, switched over and started airing the Funimation dub. Younger me wasn't exactly happy over the voice changes. Why would you get rid of Sanji's awesome Brooklyn accent? But eventually, as all things go, I came to accept the Funimation dub and realized that it's how the show should have been. It went on to be my main source of consumption of the series for, I don't know, the next 16 years? I was undyingly loyal to the Funimation dub, for better or for worse, which made Unlimited Adventure a must-have title for me when I was younger. It may come as a bit of a surprise, but Unlimited Adventure is still, to this date, the only Funimation English-dubbed One Piece game that has ever been released. Ever since, they've either gone with no voice acting or scrapped an English voice cast altogether and just gone with the original Japanese. Not saying that that's bad, but for as popular as One Piece is, and the fact that the English dub has been running as long as it has and yet only has one title translated with its voice actors is interesting. What's even more interesting were the circumstances over just when this game was released. While in Japan it was released on April 26, 2007, Unlimited Adventure released in North America on January 22, 2008. And being an English-dubbed product, this game was far beyond where the show currently was. To give you a frame of reference, Unlimited Adventure covers events through Enies Lobby, 324 episodes. Yet at the time this game was released, the dub had just aired episode 159. They were 15 episodes into Skypiea, and yet a game was released that covered all of Water 7 and Enies Lobby. Unlike 4Kids, Funimation didn't exactly seem all too concerned with supplemental materials spoiling where they currently were in the show. Nor did they seem concerned with going the extra mile to remove content as well. As such, they just released the product exactly as it was, spoilers and all. Spoiling Frankie as part of the crew as well as the Thousand Sunny was a big deal for North American audiences. They removed Frankie from the English cover, for as much as that does. It's easy to look back at this game and think it was much further ahead than it was at the time, because Frankie's voice actor, Patrick Seitz, is the official English dub for Frankie before he had a voice. This game was the first time his English voice was revealed, 4 years before he would officially make his on-screen debut. Needless to say, if you played this game when it came out, you were in deep uncharted territory. Streaming services back then weren't as prominent as they are now. You were either buying some sort of physical copy through DVDs or the mangas, or you were waiting weekly and watching Toonami like I was. But that was still far behind. A lot goes down in those later arcs, and it was an incredible spoiler for anyone who played it at the time. I would know, because I was one of them. This is how I experienced Water 7 and Enies Lobby for the first time, through Wii quality graphics and what sounds like some half-assed performances by anyone who's not the Straw Hats. Now, to be fair, I didn't play this game when it was released. I was a little bit further into the show. I think I was in Long Ring Long Land, but I definitely wasn't at Water 7 yet. But I persevered and took the spoilers head on and enjoyed Unlimited Adventure for what it delivered. Now, to be fair, this game's story isn't a one-for-one retelling. Realistically, this game tells an entirely original story. After an eating contest between Luffy, Usopp, and Chopper leaves the ship with no food, the three are obligated to catch fish to make up for their actions. Luffy, however, winds up pulling out a strange orb from the ocean, but no one seems interested over what it is. Dismayed due to the lack of islands around, Luffy heads up to get a better vantage point and wishes for an island to appear. The orb responds to this request, and an entire island rises up from the ocean, beaching the Sunny and scattering the crew. It doesn't take long to find everybody and make camp, which then opens up a whole new map to explore. Now, that doesn't mean that this is an open world. There are 6 unique locations outside of the hub world, each with its own separate environment. They only unlock after you complete the previous area by defeating the bosses, and this is where the recap of the series takes place. Due to the island, it is turning the characters' memories against them, manifesting people from their past. So realistically, you only get bits and pieces of the story instead of an entire recap as you uncover what the island is all about. But it's still enough to spoil the series as it did for many English viewers playing this game at the time. From the get-go, you're allowed to play as all 8 Straw Hats and freely swap between them whenever you want. When things first start out, everyone has very basic attacks, but the more you use a character, the more abilities will be unlocked. It's a very natural way for the game to say that if you want a well-balanced team, make sure to use everyone and level them up. Because this is the Wii and there are only so many buttons available, realistically, A is your only attack button, while B is reserved for jumping. So everyone has a basic 3-hit combo, but because this is also the Wii, swinging your Wiimote activates a special attack. Motion controls are actually used quite cleverly in this game in my opinion. Outside of using it to activate a move during combat, this game also features fishing, bug catching, and mining. Menial tasks that, if done with a standard controller, might exemplify the mundane feeling you get while doing them. But because you have to physically swing the Wiimote when catching a bug, it makes it feel like the stakes are higher. When swinging at rocks, you can get a lot more careless, and when fishing, you have to cast it and pull the rod from side to side. It may not be what you're here for when playing this game, but you have to do them all, and motion controls are a part of the Wii's design, so why not use them? Probably the biggest problem a lot of people have with this game is that it feels like a collect-a-thon. Yeah, you run around, beat up enemies, and fight bosses, but to fight those bosses, you need to collect and donate materials to gain access. What feels like nearly everything in this game can be a resource to collect, which may not sound like too much of a problem, except the game really limits how much you can store. You have an inventory, and even the campsite comes with a large storage area to put things in, but because you never know what items you're going to need next, you wind up storing everything, and there's not nearly enough space for that. The areas realistically are only about 20 to 40 minutes to complete, but because you're halted by this item donation system, it bumps the time you're in each area to about 2 to 3 hours. You're constantly running around this game, hunting items down. And that can be a big drag because there is a stamina system. It's reserved for when you use a character's special move, but it's also a resource that gets eaten up when you sprint. And you're doing a lot more sprinting in this game than you are anything else. It's why all the footage you're seeing of me running around is me dash jumping. It eats up less stamina. Enemies can drop stamina orbs when defeated sometimes, or you can find these plants to attack which will drop HP and SP orbs, but they're not that common and sometimes not worth it altogether. The amount of running back and forth you have to do is probably the biggest downside of this game. And the items aren't just for unlocking bosses. They're needed for crafting recipes to unlock weapon upgrades, they're needed for food so you can permanently increase your health and stamina. Everything requires you to be collecting. But when you're not doing that, boss fights are pretty neat. They're very Dark Souls-esque, but there's not nearly as much complexity or style to their attacks as you would hope. If they really took a page out of the Souls-like design book, these boss fights could be phenomenal. This game is already kinda structured like a Souls-like in terms of map exploration and boss arenas, and your characters being able to die in the field. Since the genre has only grown increasingly popular, I would love to see a One Piece Souls-like. And if you really want, this game also comes with a versus mode. You're allowed to play as all the other characters and bosses you had to face that you never get to play as. So props to this game for just saying, here you go. Despite its shortcomings, I think Unlimited Adventure is one of the best single-player One Piece games you could play. Unfortunately, it didn't sell that well in North America due to a lack of advertising. There were hardly any television or website ads, just a few clips and trailers posted on various websites. That, along with some mixed reviews, ultimately meant that the game's sequel titles, One Piece Unlimited Cruise 1 and 2, wouldn't get North American releases. And let me tell ya, I was peeved. I enjoyed Unlimited Adventure so much back then that I was begging for any One Piece titles that I could play, and yet I saw the Unlimited Cruise series but was never able to get my hands on them. But unlike other past One Piece titles that simply remained exclusive to Japan, Unlimited Cruise was actually very unique in that regard, which actually only frustrated me even more. It was released in both Europe and Australia in 2009. Meaning an English translation for the game existed. The product was fully translated and available, it just wasn't released in North America. But thanks to the power of the internet, this game is fully playable, and I'm glad I finally got to experience these two titles for all that they were worth. Unlimited Cruise takes what the previous title did and elevates it in all the right ways. Don't get me wrong, a lot of this game is the same in many aspects. Hell, the title screens on all three games are more or less identical, and what feels like pretty much every asset seems reused. But there's new locations, you're no longer on one island exploring various parts of it, you're using the Sunny to travel to different islands altogether. Granted, they're all about the same size as the areas in Unlimited Adventure, but it's a huge change of pace. You're not spending all of your energy traveling from your main hub area, which this time is the Sunny itself. Speaking of traveling, a lot of that effort has been simplified, and sprinting, thank God, no longer costs SP. The bar will still be used, but it'll recharge so you don't have to worry about dash jumping everywhere. Instead, your SP is used more so for the sake of combos now. A bit will be used when you shake the Wii mode, meaning how long you can string together an attack is dependent on how you combo. In Unlimited Adventure, you were pretty restricted to about 2 sequences before the game said you were done. Special moves still permanently consume the bar, but it feels a lot better in terms of both exploration and combat. Arguably the two most important things to make sure feels good. Islands even have these giant slingshots that'll send you back to the Sunny so you don't have to run all the way back, and the ship has a cannon that can send you halfway into an island, yet again mitigating a lot of the tedious traveling done before. The story is very similar in terms of its setup and execution, but it is technically speaking different. The game opens up with the Straw Hats sailing through a pretty intense storm, seeming to be caused by a mysterious green orb. Luffy does what he does best and punches it using Gear 3, which stops the storm but also pulls him into this weird pocket dimension. A voice asks if Luffy would like to accept a present, for which he obviously accepts. The voice then tells him that in order to receive his present, he and the others must first visit 4 islands and face the ordeals found on them. To assist in clearing the ordeals is a new character named Gaburi. They function exactly the same as the orb in the last game. Items are fed to them and Gaburi will in turn clear a path. There's much more to them in the plot than serving the same function as a ball, but I don't want to spoil things. As for these trials, it's practically the same as Unlimited Adventure. You fight past enemies. It is different because in that game they were very much just memories meant to reflect Popro's emotions, but in this game the enemies are basically clones of the original. Meaning it's not based on what our characters know, it's reflective based on what actually happened. My favorite example of this is Eneru. After Luffy beat him, he and the others simply never saw him again. He was shown taking his Arc Maxim to the moon, but he's yet to come up in the story again. But in the cover stories that are in the beginning of every chapter, we see his journey on the moon, his discovery of his past ancestors, and the small robot automata that were built by the Skypians, Shandians, and Birkins together. He basically forms an entire army of these cute little robots who are undyingly loyal to him because his powers of electricity energize and give them life. It was a whole thing that only Eneru could know, yet here he is with his army of automata because he was created by this tree as the current version of himself. It may seem like a small detail, like what does it matter whether or not their memory is up to date? But believe me, it makes a world of difference because it's not just the Straw Hats seeing them again, it's the villains getting a moment to also be like, oh, you again. While it may not be the actual versions of these characters, they act as though they are, which is more than good enough. Because believe me when I tell you, the characterization in these games are perfect. More than perfect. They go above and beyond, not to just give you the cookie-cutter personality tropes you would expect from these characters, but to actually put respect on who they are as characters in moments that show you that they've grown. Like, take a look at this scene between Brook and Gecko Moria and tell me it's not perfect.
人質に取ってやろうと思ったのによ。
影をよこせですと。ふざけないでください。影を奪われ、日の光を恐れて生きなくてはならない恐怖。私はあんな目に遭うのは二度とごめんです。そして大事な仲間をあのような目に遭わせることも。
And the same goes for the smaller comedic interactions. They can actually pull a laugh from you in just the right moment.
ハトのやつ
キリンジャーか。
おい、ルフィとゾロが苦戦した二人が相手かよ。
俺は苦戦してねえ。
ウソップなんであいつらのこと知ってんだ？あの時いなかったはずなのに。
But that's not to say these titles are perfect. My biggest qualm with these two games is that they are not two individual games. They are one game that has been split into two. Unlimited Cruise 1 feels like a very short and half-assed product with not many crafting recipes nor food to make. And the food you can make is basically nothing to what should be the end game. I mean, this is the way my health looked at the beginning of that game compared to when I beat it. Contrast that with how my health looked at the beginning of Unlimited Cruise 2 versus the end of that game. It's a night and day difference because Cruise 1 is the beginning half of a product, which is always the least fun. Endgame is where all the content typically is in a single-player game, making Unlimited Cruise 2 the title to play. Now, I will give it a little bit of credit. If you play the first game, all of your progress will carry over when you start the second one. Unlimited Cruise 1 and 2 features two sets of entirely different combos that can be learned and mixed and matched. It gives you so much more freedom to adjust a character's playstyle to the way you want to play them. It was just another brilliant addition. Cruise 2 really is almost a masterpiece when it comes to single-player One Piece games. I couldn't get enough of it and never wanted to put it down. But the real question is, how would these games feel on a more modern system? As much as I love Cruise and Adventure, those two were very much created to be played on the Wii. A lot of the simplicity due to the lack of buttons and novelty of the motion controls led to a very enjoyable but limited Wii experience. The last thing I wanted to see for this series was to remain forever locked in the confines of a novel system. There was room to expand, areas to improve upon what was already a solid base. If it was already able to create something fun with such limited controls, what could they do with more? One Piece Unlimited Cruise SP. Yeah, the Unlimited Cruise games got ported to the 3DS in 2011, technically making it the first Unlimited game not on the Wii. It's a fine port, all things considered. Most of the motion controls were streamlined and replaced by a simple press of the X button. Everything seems to be normal about this port except for the fishing. For some reason, they decided to make things 100 times harder. On the Wii, all you had to do was hold the Wiimote up and hold the A button to reel in a fish. But now you have to physically use your 3DS stylus to wind in the fish. It's already not a fun mechanic, but they made things so much worse. Maybe as an apology, they added extra content. The SP version comes with the Marineford option, allowing you to, as the name would suggest, play through the Marineford arc. It's quite a different change of pace from what the main game provides. The mode is very on rails. Instead of having access to all of the Straw Hats, you're instead changing between characters involved during the war. It's all fairly neat, but I'd still say stick to the Wii versions. What I was getting at before SP so kindly ruined everything was One Piece getting a new Unlimited game.
野郎ども、冒険に出発だ！仲間と共にワンピース世界を駆け巡れ！最大4人で楽しめる海賊マルチプレイ！ワンピースアンリミテッドワールドレッド！
Unlimited World Red is the fourth installment in the Unlimited series. Like SP, the game was originally developed for the 3DS in 2013, but later saw ports to the PS3, Wii U, and Vita 1 year later. It was also updated for more modern systems like the Switch, PS4, and Windows in 2017. This is one of the most distributed games in the franchise, making it one of the more available titles regardless of where you play. Graphically, it seems to have gotten a bit of an overhaul, resembling a lot more of the modern looks of One Piece games. That's not to say everything is different. Many of the exact same assets are used here once again. The trees, the grass, the coconuts are all still the same. It's nice to see things like the fish and insects get new artwork, even though they are the exact same animals. Something I feel needs to be taken into consideration when talking about this game is how it was initially designed to be played on the 3DS. So by all means, this is a handheld title. I don't know about you, but to me, games designed to be able to be played on the go kind of play by a different set of rules when judging how they are as a product. While I played this on the PS3, and it's almost a testament to this game on how, without the internet, I wouldn't have been able to tell that this was a handheld game. But it does expose some of the glaring flaws most people would see it for being any other title. First of all, this game is short. You can run through the campaign in under 10 hours, casually, I mind you. That's not trying to speedrun or anything. The story for this game is pretty short and overall a bit underwhelming when compared to its predecessors. The game kinda just throws you into the mix of things without taking much time to establish what's going on. The story revolves around a pirate named Redfield who was said to be on the same level as Whitebeard and Roger in their primes. After escaping Impel Down during the Summit War, he now continues his goal to become Pirate King. His path eventually crosses with the Straw Hats as they have befriended his once crewmate Pato. He also has the ability to create clones of people, which is the reason given in this game for fighting past foes. The tone this game presents is very much things just happening while our crew deal with it. From the beginning till I would say the final chapter of the game, it doesn't exactly feel like there's a story trying to invest you. The Straw Hats don't exactly react one way or another to the things happening around them. It's like they don't care and just want to get to the gameplay. It's not until the literal final chapter that it feels like the story kicks in and there's characterization to make it more enjoyable. But the thing to consider is that this game doesn't only provide a story. There's so many things you can do in this game to keep your playtime insanely high. If you didn't enjoy item collecting in the previous Unlimited titles, then I have good news and bad news. The good news is items are no longer required for you to progress in the story. Instead of having to collect and donate them to unblock a path, now all you need is to find something called words. Words are a new mechanic in this game, which you can equip to boost your stats and do a variety of character buffs. 9 times out of 10, all you have to do is defeat a group of enemies and the word will be given to you. So if all you wish to do is progress through the story, then gone are the days of having to take inventory and guess on what you may need. The bad news is item collecting is more prevalent in this game than ever before. That is, if you wish to do everything this game has to offer. On the bright side, items do drop way more frequently and reliably than in the past entries, and you don't even have to take inventory. You can pick up as many items as you want and they will automatically be stored for you. The whole system has been fully automated, making the time you're in menus sorting through things nigh non-existent. In fact, if you really wish, you don't have to craft a single item in this game if you really don't want to. If you want to 100% the game and do everything it has to offer, then you've got some grinding to do. Fishing and bug catching are still in this game, and instead of motion controls, they turned it into a rhythm game almost. I like this change a lot, but it feels like if you're not meant to catch something, it'll be impossible, whereas in the Wii games, you could actually skillfully catch something out of your depth. A small gripe. Probably the biggest downside to this game for me was the characters. I loved that in the previous games, every single Straw Hat was available to play at all times. It really catered to my ADHD tendencies where whenever I got bored playing a character, I'd switch over to a new one. But in World Red, you're only allowed 3. Before you set out to do any mission, you can pick whichever 3 characters you want to bring, but you're restricted to whoever you picked. They did a great new thing where the ones you do bring will be on the battlefield with you and fight as CPUs, and you'll be able to freely swap between them whenever you want. It's a cool new feature and all, but there was just this, pun intended, unlimited freedom with everyone being at your disposal. This game has a ton of character-specific actions not previously done before. So if you bring the wrong character, then you're not gonna be able to read the poneglyphs with Robin, or set traps as Usopp, or dig as Chopper. For as cool as it is running around with a few of the others, swapping between everyone is something I think they should never get rid of. Combat is fine. I found myself struggling a lot more than expected in this title. It's not my favorite system. It's not perfect on the Wii either, but it felt like it made the most with what little it had. Again, I think this is due to being a handheld title that it runs a little bit slower. This game just feels like it should be more, almost. It's not a bad entry considering how readily available it is for most people. It's one of the better One Piece games you can pick up. It arguably holds up a lot better than Unlimited Adventure, but if you ask me, Cruise is still the one to play. The Nintendo DS was a bit of a rough patch for North American audiences in terms of One Piece games. By that, I mean we didn't see a single release. That doesn't mean they don't exist. 3 were made, and they all pretty much share the same similarities. Gear Spirit was the first in 2007. I'm gonna be real with you. I'm gonna keep this short, I'm gonna keep it brief. This game is bad. It's a fighting game that barely does that. There is no storyline, there is a story mode, but all that entails is picking a character and fighting a random assortment of characters until the mode is complete. The gimmick of the DS adds cards that you can click on mid-fight to activate buffs, like attack increases or healing lost health or even a special move. But realistically, the gameplay is so not thought out that all you really need is the basic attack. Like, look at how effective holding forward while basic attacking is. And you stunlock them, so there's nothing they can do. It's down there with one of the worst One Piece games. Become Pirate King might no longer be good and is dated, but at least you feel like they tried with the gimmick of the Wonder Swan. This feels like they lacked everything and made a nothing product. There's nothing notable about this game, not even a fun fact. I'm moving on. What was a drastic improvement in the line of One Piece games for the DS was yet another fighting game called Gigant Battle in 2010. While it's not technically a sequel in the Grand Battle series, it borrows many of the same elements in regards to its gameplay and items, making it more of a spiritual successor. It's yet another 2D action fighter that focuses heavily on the Sabaody, Impel Down, and Marineford arcs. As such, those are the predominant characters available to play. I do find it odd that Robin, Frankie, and Brook have all been relegated to support characters and aren't playable. I get it, they're playable in pretty much every single game. What is it that they're not playable this one time? But because it is such a frequent thing, it becomes incredibly noticeable when they do wind up being cut. There's only 20 playable characters here, with kind of an even split between the Straw Hats, Warlords, and Impel Downcast and Marineford players. This game is fun and simple for what it provides. There's a story mode that'll take you to different stages to fight where you unlock the majority of playable and support characters. I don't think it's the best arena fighter One Piece has to offer, but for the DS, it sure as hell beats Gear Spirit. This title was actually popular enough to warrant getting a European release 1 year later, but I guess the sequel they chose to keep in Japan yet again, and that's quite unfortunate. What was yet another improvement over Gigant Battle was Gigant Battle 2 New World. It was released a little over a year after the first, but improved the game in so many ways. Firstly, they went from 20 playable characters to a whopping 45. For God's sake, Caribou and Vanderdecken are playable. Those two should never be playable over literally any other character in the franchise, and they're here. This game also finally got rid of the annoying touchscreen mechanic to activate support characters. Now you can simply get them onto the field with a simple button combination. The whole game just feels like it controls a lot more naturally and seamlessly thanks to these changes. This time around, the game covers the post-war to Fishman Island arc. Again, mostly it's just a backdrop to fight a bunch of battles. It's not exactly like it's a one-for-one retelling as some of these games try to do. It's a simple arena fighter. As such, there's not that much to actually say about it. Overall, I think it's a much better game and definitely the one worth playing of the two. It's only hindered by the fact that it was a Japan exclusive, meaning everything's in Japanese. European releases still have the benefit of being in English most of the time. So if you're able to at least navigate the menus, then Gigant Battle 2 is the better product.
今度のバトルは七部海海軍ニューカマーって岩ちゃんの海賊団とも戦えんのかワンピースギガントバトル予約だ
When someone asks you what is the definitive retelling of the One Piece story I could possibly get in video game form, how many do you think say, Romance Dawn for the PSP? There's probably one. This game suffers from many of the same problems One Piece games do when all they bring to the table is a retelling of the story. And that's that the gameplay that accompanies it better be good. I'm never going to really fault a game that's based off of a successful anime or something for retelling the story that made it successful in the first place. I get it. I may not like it, I may complain about it, but I get it. But if you're going to do that, you better make the gameplay that accompanies the retelling enough to hold your attention. Romance Dawn is a turn-based RPG with a little bit of a unique twist. Combat is fairly basic as far as turn-based combat goes. You have normal attacks and special attacks. Special attacks use TP but are stronger, so you have to build up to those by basic attacking. However, you're allowed the opportunity to mix and match the combos you do. How many actions you're allowed is determined based on how many points you have available around your character portrait. So, for example, in the beginning of the game, you can normal attack 3 times before using one special move. Or you can use the special move outright and void the rest of your turn. It's a little weird to explain, and it might sound interesting, but it's not that complex. Apparently, this game sold well enough in Japan to warrant a 3DS remake, this time being released in Australia, Europe, and North America. The game is not so bad to the point that it's literally unplayable, it just gets monotonous very fast. I can see how being a handheld is part of the appeal of this game. It's not that great in prolonged sittings, but taking it on the go and playing it in small chunks I could see being a much more enjoyable experience. Unfortunately, 10 years later, I don't think there's much of a reason to go back and play this title except for curiosity. It might have been fun at the time, but I think nowadays the bar has risen past this game and there are much better options out there. While you may have thought the Grand Battle series ended with Grand Adventure in 2006, 8 years later in 2014 they surprised everyone with Super Grand Battle X for the 3DS. While it shares the Grand Battle moniker, it's more like the Gigant Battle series in terms of its gameplay. Thanks to the more powerful 3DS, the graphics were back to, no pun intended, 3D. In a weird way, the series has almost come full circle and returned to the 2.5D layout of the originals. Only this time around, the character models look really good and have aged extremely well. It's a visually impressive game, but it's hard for me to really judge how it plays. It controls about as well as any of the others, but being in Japanese, I can't exactly read the instructions that lead to the intricacies of a fighting game. From what I can tell, the biggest advancement in this title are the multiple characters you can now play in a fight. Everyone's allowed a +1 you're freely able to swap between during battle. There are even some special attacks that can be triggered with both party members. At the end of the day, it does technically make the game have a lot more replayability and variety, and that's really what you want when the gameplay is repetitive. I do, however, have to give a special mention to the Nintendo character costumes that were made for this game. While plenty of One Piece games have been console exclusive in the past, this is one of the rare instances where the characters got special costumes to go along with it. Luffy can be dressed as both Mario or Luigi. Zoro can be dressed as Link and will use the Master Sword in place of the Wado Ichimonji. Nami is the Wii Fit trainer, which if they were really smart, they would have made a Wii Fit game with Nami as the instructor. Usopp fittingly got Yoshi because of his distinct nose. Sanji's looking kinda slick as Fox, though he just cannot seem to escape becoming a fox. It genuinely has to be his animal. Chopper got a cute little Kirby design. Robin got Samus, though not her Zero suit unfortunately. Must have been an oversight. A major oversight on someone working over there. Just saying, I won't forgive you. Frankie got Donkey Kong, of course, and Brooke got a costume for Marth. I really love seeing these things, it just adds to the fun of a game. It even reminded me of the color spread Oda did 7 years later for chapter 1028. Where he did a similar thing yet again putting the characters in a gaming scenario. Of course you can tell Nami and Usopp didn't get redesigns, but it seems like Frankie and Zoro's characters were nailed the first time around. Zoro's still Link and Frankie Donkey Kong. This time around Jinbei is here and he takes on the role of Mario's character, while Luffy has become Ken from Street Fighter. Robin embraced her Devil Child moniker and is dressed like Morgan from Darkstalkers, while Brook looks like he's taking on the role of a vampire from Castlevania. And Sanji looks like some sort of Splatoon design or something. It definitely looks like the ink gun, but his costume seems like it's something else. Maybe they were just trying really hard to not make him a fox again. And Chopper, I honestly don't know what Chopper is. Anyway, that was a wild side tangent I went on, but Super Grand Battle X should be known for at least everyone's Nintendo designs. One Piece Pirate Warriors. This might be the most popular series when it comes to One Piece games, and I get why. Like 90% of these games, you're limited to playing as only the Straw Hats. Of course, we all love them in this house, that's never a bad thing. But One Piece is filled with so many characters, it always felt like a shame that most of the time you were limited to the same 7 to 9 every single game. And even in the ones that you were allowed to play as the others, usually it's some sort of fighting game where it's just you versus one other person. I want the experience of fucking up a group of Marines or pirates as some of these other guys. And Pirate Warriors was the game that brought that dream to life. If you didn't know, it's a spin-off of the Dynasty Warriors franchise, where you hack and slash hordes upon hordes of enemies, facing bosses, and overall leveling up to a point of godlike strength, so you can continue to mow down even more mobs. Even if you've never played or are not familiar with Dynasty Warriors, you've probably at the very least seen or even played a few of their spin-offs they do in collaborations with other franchises. Fire Emblem Warriors, Hyrule Warriors, Persona 5 Strikers. Every now and then they collaborate with another IP to bring their formula wrapped in a different skin. And in this case, One Piece. The first game was released for the PS3 in 2012. Gameplay is pretty straightforward for a Warriors title. You have normal and heavy attacks, which can be combined for a variety of different combos. Pressing circle will use the character's super technique, which is usually just a trademarked attack. X is a dash feature which is meant to be used for evasion. Don't expect to use this as a movement ability to get around faster. But probably this game's trademark gimmick is the crew strike. You can link to a nearby comrade, and during a combo you can swap to them for a brief moment. It's not that great, honestly. Pirate Warriors 1 is probably the most true to form One Piece experience the story has ever gotten from a game. It tells the story from Orangetown all the way to Marineford, while changing pretty much nothing and translating the events from the series into PS3 form. I won't take away the fact that the developers went above and beyond to honor the original source material when creating this title. But with that said, this game is kind of boring because of it. I don't want to carry Nami through a 30-minute mission constantly having to place her down so I can fight just to pick her up and slowly walk up a mountain. I get it, it happened in the show, but for God's sake, it does not make for good gameplay. If you're already a One Piece fan, then this entry might be a neat way to re-experience the events of the game without having to sink in the time watching the anime would entail. And playing the game might be more engaging than rereading the manga, at least for a change of pace. But for anyone who hasn't experienced the story of One Piece, this should not be the way. Realistically, none of the games should be the way you experience One Piece for the first time. Yeah, you can skip all the cutscenes avoiding spoilers, that way you can just play the game, but if all you're seeking is gameplay, then I probably wouldn't play this one over the other three. Pirate Warriors 1 suffers from being the first of a series, meaning it provides the least amount of content with the jankiest of controls. There's only 13 playable characters in this game. Outside of the 9 standard Straw Hats, you can play as Ace, Boa, Jinbei, and Whitebeard. It's not the most diverse of casts, but at least the combat is varied and each player plays pretty much differently to every other previous One Piece game. If there is one thing I do hate about this game though, it's the quick time events. I don't know what year it began, that whole era within gaming where you had to react during a cutscene and press the A button within a certain amount of time or mash X to try and overpower someone else. I hated that era with a passion, and it is very prevalent within this game. Like, everything you do in this game. It's the one thing that really dates it. Outside of the story mode, the only other option you have is another log, which are separate story scenarios, and I put that in quotes, where you play through different events as the other characters. It says that they're story scenarios, but the story is basically non-existent. It's like Boa's, you can play as her during Marineford, but you just run around fighting enemies on the map until the story concludes the way it does. No thanks to anything you do. It's an excuse to let you play as the others without having to replay the story mode. Honestly, it's a bit dated, but worth a play if you're already a One Piece fan, if not for the simple experience of saying that you've at least played the first one. Pirate Warriors 2 went so far in the other direction of the last game, it's impressive. Unlike the first entry that tried very hard to stay true to the original source material, the story in this game doesn't even try. It's dubbed Dream Story and tells a completely original narrative, which, and I do not say this lightly, comes off as some heavy fan fiction. For the most part, when One Piece games try and tell an original story, they do, I think, manage to make it feel like it is still One Piece. In the same way any filler content or the movies or other side stories all still feel like the same product, the original stories within the games typically do a decent job at that as well. Except Pirate Warriors 2. It's the only original story across every single One Piece game that manages to feel like straight up fan fiction. I feel like I can't even really give you an idea on what the story is about because it's so all over the place. The main story revolves around these new dials the characters discover on Punk Hazard. They're similar to the dials on Skypiea, but these ones are much more top secret. Initially, they turn all of the Straw Hats outside of Luffy and Nami evil, but that's obviously just the introduction to the game to show that there's something more mysterious going on. Now, that may sound interesting, and to some of you, maybe it is. It's really a hard thing to describe, but because of the amount of characters involved and how they're involved and who's involved for when this is technically supposed to take place, narratively, it feels so strange. But fortunately, the gameplay is more refined in this title. All of the basic controls are still around from the first, but some new features were added. Firstly, characters can now use Haki to clear hordes of enemies. There is a new style gauge that can be filled up, and it can be used to power up your attacks or chain into more combos as well. The crew strike system was replaced by the partner system. It's kinda the same thing in that it allows you to swap to your partner for a brief moment, but this time it's activated by using your special attack. Your partner is also able to activate their special anytime during the swap. It's not the best because sometimes you don't want to play as your partner. Something this game did introduce that would be used for every title after, which was a great addition, is the ability to earn money and spend it on leveling up your characters. You don't have to individually grind everyone from level 1 up to 100 manually. Instead, you can buy your way up there if you're playing enough of the game, but you're maxed at your highest character. And being able to spend money in this way is a good thing, because this game has significantly more characters than the first. While Pirate Warriors had 13 playable characters, here there are now 27 unique characters. 36 if you consider each of the Straw Hats come with a pre-time skip and post-time skip variant that have their own unique moveset. So there's almost triple the amount of characters in this title, and some who have long desired to be playable. Kuma, Garp, and Perona are some of the most notable. But there's still a healthy split of Marines and Pirates available for play. Realistically, the appeal of this game nowadays is simply so you can experience the original story it tells. Because everything 2 does kinda pales in comparison when you get to Pirate Warriors 3. The first 2 titles aren't even in the conversation when asking which One Piece Pirate Warriors game you should play, because 3 and 4 put the first 2 to shame. Pirate Warriors 1 is probably the most faithful adaptation of the story, but the gameplay is dated and the least developed of the series. 2 is better than 1 when it comes to the gameplay, and it has more characters, but that's about it. But 3 is the best of both worlds. The story returns to adapting the events from the series, whereas the first game covered Orangetown to Marineford with precise detail, 3 covers from Romance Dawn all the way to Dressrosa, with more of the arcs in between that were previously skipped over. As a result, it is more content, but it's not nearly as careful as the first when it comes to its retelling. While more of the details are kinda skimmed over, it's not exactly careless when it comes to its adaptation, especially when compared to some of these other games, meaning you still get a more than satisfactory adaptation of these arcs, if that's what you're looking for. Plus, there's no QuickTime events, so simply by that prospect alone, it's worth it. The only exception is its ending. Pirate Warriors 3's whole backdrop is Dressrosa, but at the time this game was released, Dressrosa wasn't finished, meaning they had to come up with a completely original ending for this game. Needless to say, it really goes to show why Oda cannot be replaced. But where this game really stands out is its gameplay. Whereas 2 built upon the original, 3 continued to evolve. Where the crew strike system was replaced by the partner system was replaced by the Kizuna Rush, where the player can summon another character alongside them in battle. When the meter is built up during normal gameplay, you can add an extra combo to your attack, continuing the button sequence, or when the meter is full, you can activate the Kizuna Rush and summon up to 4 support characters to your side, and all together you can unleash a super strong special attack. This feels so much better than the crew strike system from the previous game. The support characters here feel so much more naturally involved in the combat without interrupting the flow of gameplay that forcibly switching in the last game did. It somehow manages to get more characters feeling involved without ruining the ebb and flow of combat. Some characters can now even enter a state of overdrive, like Luffy's second gear or Usopp's Sojking. Coins are now a resource. I hadn't really talked about them in the other 2, but in those games they were pretty much just basic stat boosts, equipped to increase whichever stat you want. But now they're used for permanent stat upgrades. You can collect them through special means, correlating with specific crew members for a Kizuna Rush, or simply defeating them on the battlefield. They're automatically collected, so you don't even really have to think about it. What I'm getting at is the system encourages you to play as everyone. You can specifically target character coins you need, and it's not hindering you for varying your playthrough. This game also has a new mode called Dream Log, where you can complete a series of randomized battles on your way to unlock new characters. Some playable characters you can only unlock through this game mode, but more importantly, this is your end game content. You don't have to run through the same story missions over and over again. The semi-randomized nature of this mode shakes things up as you're farming for progression on your characters. And that's kind of an important thing. This time around, there are 37 playable characters. Yet again, technically 46 if you take into consideration the Straw Hat's pre- and post-time skip variants. This is where they finally started to add some of the more uncommon ones throughout the years. Rob Lucci, Gecko Moria, Magellan, Caesar, Fujitora, Doflamingo. Now we're getting into the thick of things. Pirate Warriors 3 was such a good game. It was such a success that it was only natural that the series would continue with Pirate Warriors 4. Pirate Warriors 4 is the first time in the series where it's not necessarily considered a step forward for the franchise. So far, each game has been a gradual increase in quality across the board. Gameplay has been refined, more content has been added, how you progress and what keeps you playing were things that the series only got better at as each title went on. And then Pirate Warriors 4 came out. Don't get me wrong, 4 is still leagues better than 1 and 2. It's when you're comparing it to 3 that it has a hard time outshining what that game was able to provide. 4 both adds so much new content, while unfortunately, for some reason, taking away a fair amount as well. In terms of the story, to give you a frame of reference, Pirate Warriors 3 covered a whopping 22 different arcs. Pirate Warriors 4 covers 8. Alabasta, Water 7, Enies Lobby, Sabaody, Marineford, Dressrosa, Whole Cake Island, and Wano, the latter 2 being new. Dressrosa is also technically new now that they actually finished the arc. But yet again, in contrast, like Pirate Warriors 3, Wano wasn't finished at the time this game was made, so it had to completely make up its own original ending. I get it, story mode, not exactly the most important when it comes to these types of games. I've harped on enough of these games for simply just retelling the events of the show, and the Pirate Warriors games, outside of 2, don't do anything special. So what about where it really matters? What about the roster? While this game boasts a whopping 52 current playable characters compared to the last game's 46, with more still coming, for some reason characters wound up being removed from this game who were previously playable. Firstly, ever since Pirate Warriors 2, each of the Straw Hats came with a pre- and post-time skip version. Yet in 4, only Luffy, Zoro, Usopp, and Sanji have both versions. The pre-time skip variants of Nami, Chopper, Robin, Frankie, and Brook are completely gone. And on top of that, characters like Eneru, Gecko Moria, Perona, Garp, Magellan, Kuma, and Caesar Clown were also completely cut from the game, despite actually even being in the game. There they are. Yet for some reason, they are no longer playable characters, making you feel like you're losing content instead of gaining it like a sequel should feel as. So that 52 should be 64 and counting. Don't get me wrong, I love all the new characters from Dressrosa like Bartolomeo and Cavendish being playable, along with the Worst Generation and the Whole Cake Island characters from Germa 66 to Big Mom and all of her kids to the Wano cast. Like, the amount of new characters is wild. The fact that just by looking at the numbers between 3 and 4, you would think that there's only a 6 new character difference does a disservice to this game. They still managed to have a cast of +6 when they removed 12. And it's because of this giant cast and the fun gameplay that it gives 3 a run for its money. Gameplay has changed a surprising bit from the last one. First off, you can now jump for the first time. In the other titles, it was always combos that put you into the air that allowed for aerial attacks. But now you can jump whenever you want. You're also able to dash. Considering the amount of traveling done in these games, dashing allows you to move around the map faster, but it also damages the enemies when you do so, making movement a much more fun mechanic. The Kizuna Rush was completely removed and instead replaced with 4 special skills. Now, by holding the R1 button and pressing one of the face buttons, you can do an assigned input. Less teamwork, but more options for individual character attacks, I guess. The progression system has also changed. Whereas in 3 you were rewarded for correlating with crew members during team attacks, now you basically just have a skill tree where you spend money and coins collected to unlock new skills. This is really where it feels like 3 takes the whole cake, because the game's progression really encouraged you to play different characters, but due to the skill tree in 4, it encourages you to really beef up one guy, then use them to assist in everyone else's growth. Realistically, yeah, there's less story, but considering the amount of new playable characters, I'm not so sure many people care that much, or at least they're willing to overlook the content that was removed to simply enjoy how much diversity there is available here. If you're gonna choose between the Pirate Warriors games, you really gotta pick between 3 or 4. 4 boasts a large cast with phenomenal fast-paced gameplay, but the endgame and grinding is a bit more tedious and boring. 3's gameplay isn't nearly as fast-paced, but it's still fun. The endgame, however, is much more replayable and natural, making you feel like the hours you're putting into after the game, you're being rewarded for. Regardless, the Pirate Warrior series is one I'm glad exists. It might not be my ideal One Piece game, but it fills a necessary void of being able to play as every character, and I hope only even more people get added to the games. I'll tell you this right out of the gate, Burning Blood might just have the best commercial for a One Piece game. Crocodiles turning skyscrapers to sand, Eneru's bringing the thunder and lightning, and Luffy swinging through the city. It's pretty much just Spider-Man, Electro, and Sandman. Burning Blood is yet another fighting game, this time developed by Spike Chunsoft. This game does feature a story mode, but it only covers the events from Marineford, interestingly enough. I think it's the only game that decided to cover only a single arc. They're split into individual episodes where you play as Luffy, Whitebeard, Akainu, and Ace, fighting all of the characters present during the whole war. I'll give the game credit, there's definitely quality to the way everything looks, it doesn't look bad, they even just pull straight up screenshots from the anime. But on the other side of things, I'm not so sure Marineford was necessarily the best option they could have chosen. Don't get me wrong, it's an amazing arc, it's a phenomenal arc, but if this was someone's first experience with One Piece, then it's the worst thing that they can jump right in the middle of. This is practically the arc. This is the one arc that it seems no one can avoid being spoiled for. Everyone loves to spoil this particular arc. It's basically a canon event for One Piece fans, and not even what happens during it, but having Marineford spoiled for you might as well be the event. If you somehow manage to get through Marineford completely oblivious, it's a miracle, and I'm jealous of you. So Burning Blood just winds up dropping you right in the middle of everything going down, and that's a dangerous thing. It's fairly common for people who are unfamiliar with a franchise, but aware of it due to its popularity, to sometimes out of the blue pick up a game and see what it's all about. So realistically, anyone who's unfamiliar with One Piece should avoid Burning Blood like it's the plague. The problem is, this is one of the most modern One Piece fighting games, and it's available on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. So like Unlimited World Red, it's one of the most distributed titles. It may have been released 7 years ago at this point, but if you're looking for a fighting game, then this is the most easily defaulted to option. I get why they picked it. There were so many characters around. The roster basically builds itself. There are 44 playable characters, the majority of which were present during Marineford. But, you know, like all the One Piece fighting games, that's kinda just the backdrop to everything, so there's a ton of characters in general who are playable. One of the more notable ones is Guild from the Film Gold movie. He's a DLC character, but it's quite rare for the movie characters to make appearances in the other mediums. But even then, that status quo has been changing in recent history as well. Each player can pick up to 3 characters and swap between them anytime. The environments are all 3D and open like the Gigant Battle series, but there's no items or anything, making it a much more legit fighting game. Again, I feel like I have to repeat this. These aren't exactly my cup of tea, and I'm not great at them, so all the mechanics and intricacies when it comes to combat are lost on me. It seems to at least have a decent consensus amongst fans. Not the best game, but fun enough. One Piece Great Pirate Colosseum was yet another fighting game, this time developed by Arc System Works for the 3DS. These guys are known for their fighting games, like Guilty Gear and Blaze Blue, but they've also done a ton of licenses with other series. Dragon Ball has a very popular line of games that they've developed. They even did Persona 4 Arena, and if you're familiar with my channel to any extent, then you'd be familiar with Ruby and their Arrowfell game released in 2022. But for this segment, we're talking about One Piece. It's a fighting game. Look, I honestly didn't wind up playing that much of this game because it kinda just is what it is, more so than even Burning Blood. It's a fighting game where you pick 3 characters and go up against an opponent's 3 characters. There's combos, finishers, all the things you'd expect. There's 23 playable characters, but none that are new. Yet again, Guild is playable, but that's to be expected as this game was released only 5 months after Burning Blood. There's a story mode, but the presentation leaves a lot to be desired. It's a Japanese exclusive, so not many people got to experience this title, but then again, you're not missing much. One Piece World Seeker has somehow managed to gain this reputation as being the worst One Piece game out there, and I mean, have you seen some of the games in this video? I feel like this game somehow found itself the victim of entering a mainstream audience. While in 2019 One Piece was the furthest thing from a niche franchise with a small fan base, I think the average gamer wasn't exactly paying attention to all the One Piece games throughout the years. Hell, I think One Piece fans weren't paying attention to One Piece games. For the better part of a decade at this point, One Piece was pretty much only producing fighting games. It had been a while since an original single-player story was made. Fans were starved, and Worldseeker looked like it might be that drop of water in a vast desert. When the trailer came out, it was easy to look at what was being shown and think that this was One Piece's turn to finally deliver a true open-world game. Breath of the Wild and Spider-Man had come out the years prior, and it showcased that a fully explorable single-player world and story was still in the cards for companies to make. Worldseeker was once again being developed by Ganbarion, who has been developing games for the series since 2001, and arguably has the best track record when it comes to making One Piece games. They've proven that they make combat-oriented games, they've made single-player games, they nail the characterizations of the Straw Hats. It was just a matter of taking what they already knew and putting it inside of a different genre. The result? One Piece Worldseeker is not exactly the best game, but it's far from being the worst. The whole game just feels lacking in a lot of aspects. The game takes place in a new location known as Prison Island. It starts with the Straw Hats already in the midst of their plan to steal a treasure that they had heard of on the island, but as you would expect, things don't necessarily go their way, leading to everyone being split up, and the treasure is bigger than anyone expected. Being an open world game, you're free to explore the map to your heart's content. You play as Luffy in this game, and a lot of the open world aspects seems to have been inspired by the Batman Arkham and Spider-Man series. By that, I mean Luffy is able to grapple from the tops of trees to the rooftops of the cities to traverse the map, making movement an inherent part of the gameplay experience. And yeah, it's a fun part of the game. Combat is fairly straightforward. You've got your normal attacks and wide variety of special abilities. Like those others, there is now also a skill tree where you can unlock and upgrade all of Luffy's moves. Like, this game feels like it has all of the makings to be an above-average game. But something's missing. That sense of adventure and fun you get from One Piece is just lacking here. You know, being an open world game, you're often traversing large stretches of land in between missions, and yet there's just an eerie silence as you do so. No music, no soundtrack, nothing. It just exemplifies this feeling of nothing being there, not the grand adventure it should be. Same goes for the enemies. Like, there are some enemies, but not nearly enough to make the island feel inhabited. And the gameplay isn't as fun as the Batman or Spider-Man series that you want to stop and fight the enemies. Sometimes it feels like more of a hassle than anything. If they just tweaked the gameplay to make combat feel more fluid and seamless like those games, then it might have changed things for the better by a lot. But, you know, thinking about it, this game realistically is one of those rare instances that I would say that as a standalone product, it really struggles to stand on its own two legs. But what makes it 10 times more interesting is its connection to the larger continuity of non-canon One Piece products. A major plot point in this game revolves around the Dynastones, the weapons of mass destruction that are said to be able to rival that of the ancient weapons. You'd be forgiven if you hadn't heard of them before. They're neither in the manga nor the anime, but they're not exclusive to this game. They're an original creation that has been used multiple times for the movies. The Dynastones initially made their first appearance and were prominently at the forefront of Film Z. But the use of the Dynastones had also appeared in the Heart of Gold film and now make yet another appearance in Worldseeker. So if you've only played this game, then you might think it a complete waste of time for not expanding the lore. But realistically, it does, just for the movies, which are also considered non-canon. It's like it's got its own set of lore it's both playing with and simultaneously expanding. So if you approach this game thinking of it as part of the film universe, then it might give you a different appreciation for what it does. But the biggest disappointment when it comes to World Seeker, however, has to be its lack of characters. Oh, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of characters here, and I mean a lot. From 4 current/former Navy admirals, members of the world government, warlords, Germa 66, the Revolutionary Army, damn near everyone. You would think it was impossible to have finessed them all like Isaac does in this game. They're all here. But Luffy is the only playable character throughout the entire main story. All of the Straw Hats are still around. It's not like they're written out of the story or sent off to do other things. They just say, "We'll leave this up to you, Luffy," and then disappear. I can only imagine it was because this game was centered around Luffy's movement and his ability to grab onto the trees and soar through the air and scale buildings. Not all the Straw Hats are built the same in this regard, so yeah, exploring the open world with characters who aren't built for traversal can make things difficult, so much so that you cut everyone out completely. Except, they proved that wasn't exactly the problem. Later that year, they released DLC. Zoro, Sabo, and Law were all made playable with new episodes to accompany their gameplay. And yeah, they lacked the ability of Luffy's Gum Gum Fruit, but they worked around it and made character-unique traversal mechanics. Zoro can jump up walls, Sabo can just dash to the location, and Law can use shambles. They proved that if they really wanted, they could have come up with varying movement mechanics unique to each Straw Hat. I get it, it's a lot of work, especially since there was a skill tree, and having to do that for 9 different characters might have been more trouble and money than it was worth. But it would have made this game so much more replayable. Being stuck to a single character the entire playthrough is rough. I think that it kind of has to be commonplace for single-player One Piece games that, at least by the end of the game, everyone has to be playable. I know it may sound like I'm complaining a lot about this game, but what makes something feel worse than being a straight-up bad game is a decent game that had the potential to be great. World Seeker tried a lot of new things, never before done for One Piece games, and the developers shouldn't be dissuaded to never use this gameplay style again. Like the Unlimited series, maybe a sequel or two would benefit its gameplay and identity. Anytime sequels are made for a series, it tends to improve vastly than what the last one did. It's an okay game, not as bad as everyone says it is. And we have finally reached One Piece Odyssey, the most recent entry having come out in January of 2023. The game was developed by ILCA, the same people responsible for the Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl Pokemon remake in 2021. And that makes a lot of sense. While this isn't technically the first turn-based JRPG in the franchise, all of the other ones have usually had some kind of gimmick, or they were only released in Japan. So to many, this was the first and possibly only turn-based One Piece game they can actually experience. And this is as true to form of a turn-based RPG as they could possibly have made. When it comes to the story, Odyssey does the half and half kind of thing, where it technically does tell an entirely original story, but it revolves around reliving events from the past. The Straw Hats wind up shipwrecked on the mysterious island of Wofford. On it, they meet a man named Audio and a woman named Lim. Lim was initially hesitant of our character's presence on the island and so used her powers to steal everyone's abilities. She transformed them into cubes and scattered them around the whole island. This is the game's way of starting everyone from square one, despite being as far as Whole Cake Island at the time. Without their abilities, our characters don't know their movesets, and so you go around collecting these cubes. You explore a new area called Memoria, which are worlds created from the memories of the Straw Hats. I will say, I do actually really like the angle they approached with reliving the events of this series. The world of Memoria is built from their memories, but memories aren't always technically correct. So despite having grown stronger over their journey, the villains they fought at the time, they remember being strong and difficult. So they are created to be as much of a problem as they remember them being. And the events don't all play out exactly as they happened either. I appreciate the unique approach to an overused concept for One Piece games. The gameplay is turn-based and takes place on this 4-quadrant battlefield. It's weird to explain if you haven't experienced it, but every fight will take place on one large field, but that is split up into 4 sections, so all of the characters and enemies may be split up randomly on the field. You're able to move from section to section, or even attack from a distance if your teammate needs help, and so on. All of the moves are animated beautifully and look really good, but like any game like this, you're seeing these animations hundreds of times, so it doesn't take long to turn on the fast forward mode. The only other mechanic worthy of note is the attack types. This game features a rock, paper, scissors element to combat, but they've instead been renamed to power, speed, and technique. Every enemy you encounter is designated with one of these types, as are the Straw Hats. Luffy, Sanji, and Chopper are power types, Nami, Usopp, and Frankie are speed, while Robin, Zoro, and Brook are technique. All this does is increase the damage done if you attack using your appropriate style. I couldn't help but notice how similar this mechanic was to the finishers in Grand Adventure. In that game, when you use your ultimate, you had to choose between strength, technique, or wisdom, and put that against whatever your opponent chose. And it's amazing that this game just renamed strength to power and replaced wisdom with speed. I don't know if this is exactly where they got it from because I haven't read any interviews about the game, but I find it hard to believe this was a coincidence. Outside of those, it's all your typical RPG elements: items, accessories, side missions, and so on. You can play as any of the other Straw Hats in the overworld, and they all do their own unique things. Luffy can find hidden treasure, Nami money, Sanji ingredients, Zoro can cut paths, Usopp can shoot items down that are too high, Robin can read things, you know, all that stuff. This game is probably the most conflicted I've felt about a title because I struggle to even come close to calling this a bad game. Realistically, it's the furthest thing from it. The visuals all look really good, it plays the way it's supposed to, there's all this extra content outside of the main story. This game was promoted as the biggest One Piece game ever made, and on paper, technically that is really true. There's very little to actually complain about, but it's all kinda just good. It harkens back to a lot of the earlier One Piece games, in which they're not technically bad games, but they're simultaneously not remarkable one way or the other. It feels more like a playing it safe type of entry. It stuck to the basics, went with what's proven to work, and as a result, people don't harp on it the same way they do with something like World Seeker. You can't single out any one specific thing with this game and claim it's the reason it doesn't work, because everything in this game works. Odyssey is objectively one of the best One Piece games that has ever been made and that you can play, especially when compared to a lot of other anime licensed games. 9 times out of 10, other series just make arena fighters. It's the same gimmick over and over again. But One Piece is out there trying to set an example. They're making original stories, crafting single-player experiences. They may not hit it out of the park every single time, but you can tell that they're at least trying, and they always have. Throughout all of One Piece's gaming history, they have tried a lot of different things. Some worked, others didn't, but One Piece never just made one type of game. Even when they had a successful formula, they were still trying something different. I think that might be my biggest hiccup when it comes to Odyssey. I'm actually comparing it to other mainstream games like it. Other One Piece games, I took it for what it was, an anime licensed title. I didn't expect much, and as a result, I was comparing it to a lower quality of competition. Compared to other anime licensed games, Odyssey may as well be a masterpiece. But in the larger gaming space, it's not. But Odyssey was a title that felt like it managed to enter that realm of an actual AAA game more than just its brand. Odyssey is almost the perfect encapsulation of what the series means, because it's an entry that dared to dream. One Piece games may never reach the quality its other mediums are able to provide, but throughout the years they have always been trying. From board games to party games, from arcade fighters to arena fighters, from side-scrollers to strategy games, One Piece has done a lot over the past 26 years, and there are plenty of titles still worth giving a try that are worthy of the name One Piece.